Here's what actually happened.
The foundation of all knowledge.
I'm really mad that
what difference does it make, right? What
Stop.
The deregulation of the industry is obviously going to cause more of that industry.
And to lubricate the trust connection between people until they have enough.
Yet we could still look at biological reality in determining who's a female, even if there are.
Why don't you denounce feminism the same way you're denouncing capitalism? If you don't...
For something to be objective, it needs to be verifiable. And you can't verify...
If I make a claim as a political pundit, it is true that I definitely could be wrong. Yeah, you're promoting, right?
Ideology is the main tenet of politics, right? This is my ideology.
So, 2015, anyone go back and watch the footage? The first GOP debate.
Cool. Okay. Oh, they dead? We're good. For a bar, you say.
And good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am Sara, the Raging Tomato, here bringing to you live another debate. I have with me this evening Rob Noerr and Ryan, the Radical Coder. Of course, two regular panelists here on this show. We love having them, and I'm super excited to have them debate this evening. The topic is going to be a little bit of a shifter. They have several pieces to get through, but the overall compilation is going to be Trump criticisms. We've seen these two on screen before, and now we're ready to just kind of nail through point by point, and they're going to give you all of that with their opening statements. Rob, would you like to kick us off?
Thank you. Pleasure to be here. So Ryan is like when you're growing up and you have like your friend's little brother that wants to play sports with you and you keep beating the shit out of them, but they keep crawling back. So once more, we'll do it again today. The teacher will once more school the student, but it should be a lot of fun. I actually always enjoy my conversations with Ryan. So I've been looking forward to this. So let me take you back in time to explain what this is going to be. The first panel I really did on Sara's show was like the Thursday Throwdown. The topic that I came up with was all criticisms of Trump by Democrats and media should be laughed at and ignored. And this panel occurred on, I believe, May 29th last month. So it's been about 30 days exactly. Now, what I meant by that was Democrats, and of course, it's this pithy tagline, but Democrats and Republicans do this at some point, will criticize Trump about things that they had no problem when Democrats or the other side did just as bad, if not worse. So 20 minutes before that debate, I come upstairs, I put together some notes of 20 examples of sort of Democrat hypocrisy that sort of go in with that criticism that I'm making there. As the panel goes on, Ryan comes on, and this thing always happens with Ryan where I'll be blowing him out in a debate and he'll like hedge on this. He'll be like, yeah, but like, dude, it's just misinformation. I can't go through it now, but it's misinformation. So here's what I did. I did everything that you shouldn't do as a debater. I gave him all of my notes. I did not adjust the notes. I did no preparation whatsoever. And I gave Ryan a month to go through the notes that I threw together in 20 minutes so that he could pick apart every single one of those in any way he sought fit to try to show how I'm spreading misinformation. Now, I anticipate what we'll see is a few semantical jabs here or there. And hey, good for you, Ryan, if you're able to find even anything that I misspelled or slightly misstated in my notes, even though the thrust of what I'm saying is always true. That's fine. We can debate all that, and I'm sure I'll be right on every one of those instances anyways. But I hope that this gets off his chest this crucial point, which is serious just for a moment. We had a previous previous administration that wanted to create a czar to censor misinformation. And so when people throw this shit around, oh, you just spread misinformation, you spread misinformation, it sort of sticks in my craw a little because people always say this shit. And then when we dig down into the specific thing they're saying is misinformation, I would say my track record's about 99% of proving that I'm generally right and it wasn't misinformation. So I'm going to allow Ryan to control the entire direction of the debate. If he wants to focus in on one of these things instead of all 20, that's fine. We could focus in on one. If he wants to talk about something completely unrelated, that's fine too, that he thinks that I've spread misinformation. I don't give a shit. No excuses. Whatever he wants to do to get it off his chest, I'm more than happy to be here. It's nice for the little schoolboy to come to the schoolyard again and to spank him once more. So let's get the show on the road. Ryan, go ahead and proceed.
Go ahead, Ryan.
Beautiful. Yes, I'm always excited to get a spanking. So before we get into the document, I want to be clear about why I'm here. I'm not here to dunk on Rob or catch him slipping. I don't think Rob is malicious. I think he's sharp, fast, and intense. And honestly, even when I agree with him, sometimes I lose the thread. It's not an insult. It's just what happens when the pace is very relentless, which it often is in these spaces. Now, I'd love to slow everything down, put Rob on 0.75 speed, and walk through each and every single point with care, but we surely won't have that luxury tonight. So we're going to move very fast. And my goal is to stay grounded. When a claim flies by, I want to be ready to flag the contradictions and to spotlight the fair critiques and to push back when things get shaky. So I have a list of all of the different segments from his notes and my own notes organized and reflected on over some period of time. The issue is that when we go very fast, Rob particularly, we risk stacking claims that sound stronger together than they are alone. And my job tonight is to untangle those claims and separate the signal from the noise. I'll agree when it's fair and pause when it's murky. At the very least, make sure we know what we're arguing about. I have a lot of questions for Rob, and I think we can view tonight as a test of his strength under pressure. A few weeks ago, Rob and I spent 2 hours on just one sentence, the opening sentence of this document. So if that gives you any inclination of what you're in for tonight, I came into that conversation sharper, and I want more of that even at high speed. So let's open it up, hit every section that we can, and see where the threads actually lead.
Thank you, Ryan. And just for a word to the audience, I do have the document here. If it needs to be referred to, I can take a peek at it. It is pretty lengthy, so I don't anticipate they'll get through everything this evening, but we're going to try our best to move through, as Ryan said, as quickly as possible, but also as slow as we need to as well. Also, a kind reminder to the audience, we are going to get through the debate. We will close with our closing statements, and then we will move into reading and responding to your kind super chats. And then, of course, as always, we will open up the panel for open panel dumpster fire, and you all can come have your fun. Outside of that, gentlemen, I leave the floor open to you.
All right, sir. Fire away. Where do you want to start?
Let's go. Well, let's start with number one. Obviously, we've had a pretty extensive conversation about this one already, so we'll try to move through it fairly quickly. But the claim you made in your document is Hillary and the DNC team colluded with a suspected Russian spy, Igor Danchenko, to get dirt on Trump to prove that he got dirt from Russians. So, Rob, do you have any evidence that Hillary Clinton herself or anyone in her campaign ever spoke to or coordinated directly with Igor Danchenko, or is that purely speculative?
So it is speculative that they personally met with Igor Danchenko. However, when I say that they colluded, I think that colluding through an intermediary is still collusion. For example, if Sarah's a Russian spy and I decide to collude with her by paying you, Ryan, and then you go and talk to Sara, and then you come back and you're like, here's this person that's working with the Russian government, and here's the information she gave. I think it's completely fair to say that I, through an intermediary, have colluded with Sara.
Okay. Well, I don't think that most people use the word colluded in that way, but I that's fair enough for you to have that opinion. We'll definitely come back to that Additionally, do you acknowledge that the FBI's Russia investigation was triggered not by the Steele dossier, but by George Papadopoulos telling an Australian diplomat that Russia had dirt on Hillary Clinton?
Yes, we can talk about that briefly. No problem. First, the first story we got was the P claims in the dossier. In fact, Harry Reid talked about this a week before the election. Mother Jones released that story right before the election. And so we were led to believe as the American people that this investigation, I think Harry Reid acknowledged that there was an investigation was started based on this dossier, but that was not the case. The FBI later claims that the investigation, I could screw up the dates here. I believe it was July 31st of 2016 was the start of the investigation. This is the claim that we're told. George Papadopoulos, this low-level guy on Trump's team, was having dinner with this Maltese professor called Joseph Mifsud. Joseph Mifsud basically says, hey, let me put you in contact with this dude who's Russian. They say they have dirt on Hillary. Papadopoulos goes and talks to that Russian. He comes back, tells the Trump team. Trump team's like, don't do this shit. What are you doing? Later, he's drunk at a bar, talks to this Australian diplomat named Alexander Downer, a person who himself is connected to the Clinton Foundation and was at one point under some sort of investigation, I believe, in Australia for giving Australian tax dollars to the Clinton Foundation. He was exonerated in that investigation, but nonetheless, you can see his close ties. Allegedly, Papadopoulos said, hey, I heard the Russians have dirt on Hillary. And that's why we're told that we had to start the Russia collusion investigation.
All right. Do you acknowledge that Danchenko was under a dormant espionage probe that was closed when the FBI believed he left the country? We discussed that pretty exhaustively, so I think that's a fair yes. But do you also acknowledge that he was then arrested in the U.S. in 2013, meaning the FBI would have either known or quickly learned that he was still here?
No, I did not know he was arrested in 2013, irrelevant to the statement that I made. He was suspected of being a Russian spy, and as we talked about during our 2-hour conversation on this one sentence, it was clear that the Hillary team and the DNC would have known that this was a person that was suspected in the past of being a Russian spy. Just for the audience, if you don't mind, what had happened was 2008, 2009, something like this. Igor Danchenko, who is the primary subsource of the Steele dossier, Hillary's team and the DNC go through this law firm, Fusion GPS. They are like, hey, get dirt on Trump. Fusion GPS contacts this UK spy named Christopher Steele. Christopher Steele then gets a bunch of sources, the key one being Igor Danchenko. This is the one that's making the most serious claims. He was said like to be Russian #1 or something like that. So everyone, including the FBI and Hillary's team, knew that this guy was a Russian, and Hillary's team and the DNC would have known that he was accused at one point of being a Russian spy. The entire reason that I put this argument together, just all of these arguments, if you don't mind me, Ryan, I'll say this. This was all examples of things that Democrats complain about Trump, but they themselves have done worse or as bad. So in this case, the Russia collusion investigation boils down to this. Trump is bad and needed to be investigated for multiple years, including a special counsel, because he was accused of his team trying to collude with Russians to get dirt on his opponent, Hillary Clinton. And the way that they sought to prove that was them colluding with a Russian and actually getting dirt, to which the FBI then actually used to get illegal FISA warrants to spy on Trump's team. So they literally did what they were accusing Trump's team of doing. That's why we're discussing this.
Okay, we'll see how that holds up. I have more notes on a lot of stuff you just brought up, but do you also acknowledge? Okay, so actually, I want to make a quick note here because you weren't aware of the 2013 arrest.
It's true.
So do you still think, with that being added, with that new knowledge, do you still think that it's fair in 2016 to call Danchenko a suspected Russian spy, knowing the FBI would have surely reopened the espionage probe if they were still concerned about it?
Yes, for two reasons. One, can you illuminate to me what this arrest was in 2013 in the United States?
Yeah, let me see. 2013 Danchenko. I don't know the exact terms of the arrest.
I mean, was it like a speeding ticket? Was he accused of like drug trafficking? Just the general idea.
Drunk in public, disorderly conduct and failure to have his 2-year-old child in a safety seat. So
okay, so was he like visiting? Was he living in the United States? What was the nature of his status when he was arrested?
My understanding is he was living in the United States because he never left. Right? He never actually left. It was a misunderstanding.
Yeah, I believe that that's the case. Nonetheless, it's irrelevant to the fact. So I believe that if I'm trying to intuit what you're saying here, it is. So there's this investigation into this dude in like 2008, 2009. The FBI closes it, not because they're like, we've looked into us and the claims are untrue. They close it because they think that he's fled the country. Then 4 years later, it turns out actually he's still here and he gets some sort of charge. So you're like, they could have reopened the investigation then if they wanted. That's not really the way it works, though, right? There could be different agents. Once the case is closed, like to reopen it up would cause effort and it would be different people that were working on it, etc. So I don't think this gets to proving. To your second point where you're saying, well, would that mean then we would no longer be able to call him a suspected Russian spy? As we said last time, I would do this. Let's say that O.J. Simpson is still alive and you're palling around with him at a party. And I say, oh man, radical coders hanging out with a suspected murderer. Would you say, oh no, that case has been dropped? He's no longer under investigation. Of course not. Same thing here. Hillary's team, the reason that Igor Danchenko was a source was because of his connections to the Russian government. They knew that at one point he was accused of being a spy in the United States for the Russian government. And then they went through intermediaries because they knew that those claims would be able to buttress an argument, which Hillary's team, and there's much evidence to suggest this, that Hillary's team concocted this scheme because they knew that they themselves were weak on the Russia collusion angle, for maybe reasons that we'll get to later. So my claim still stands up that Hillary's team and the DNC colluded, yes, through an intermediary, but they colluded with a suspected Russian spy. Yes, Igor Danchenko was a suspected Russian spy. He was sought out because of his connections to Russia, and they did get dirt on Trump.
Okay. And does the likelihood of him being considered a Russian spy, which again, you agree, you have no evidence that Hillary Clinton or her team even actually knew who he was or had any direct contact with him. But
that's
do you
not
think
true.
that
I didn't say, I said the opposite. They would know who he was. I don't have evidence that they had direct contacts. There's certainly implications that they did, but I cannot provide you any testimony that says that they directly met with them. But they would have got this information and knew who the subsource was.
Okay, so fair. So they would have known who he was after receiving the information. Okay,
Correct.
so but not necessarily you don't have evidence that they knew who he was when they were like requesting the information, right? Like it wasn't until after.
So I believe now this, you could fact check me on this, but I'm pretty sure I'm correct about this. They knew that Fusion GPS was reaching out to Christopher Steele, right? But I don't know they knew who Christopher Steele would reach out to. It also seems apparent that they knew that what they were looking for was information to tie Trump to Russia. And so given that, and then they get the information back and it says, oh, I talked to this Russian guy, Igor Danchenko, who has contacts with the Russian government. Yes, they would have known.
By that point,
your argument, I can make your argument better, right? You want to hear the better version of what you're trying to say here? Well, of course they were communicating with someone that had contacts to the Russian government. Isn't that what if a Russian spy tells you that one of the candidates is also working with a Russian spy, wouldn't that buttress their claims? Isn't that the exact type of person that would know? That would be a better argument for you, right?
Well, I think the argument I'm making is more that I don't think that it's really fair to consider him a Russian spy in 2016. So even if they knew who he was, which they might have known after receiving the information, they might have identified, oh, this is who Danchenko is. But I don't think that they would see that. And then given all the information available at the time, I don't think they would conclude that he was at that moment currently a suspected Russian spy. Additionally,
do you mind if I ask you this real quick? At some point you acknowledge they would have known, right? Once they get this information, you acknowledge they would have known. They might have known that he was under investigation previously for espionage, but he was never indicted. And again, at the time he was living in the U.S. And there's no reason to believe the FBI had no idea by that point. This would be 3 years after his arrest. So the idea that there was no reopening of the probe seems shaky. If Hillary's team was so concerned that Trump may reach out to people connected to the Russian government to get dirt on her, don't you think that it would behoove them once they found out that they were doing the same thing to say, oh shit, we did the same thing?
Can you say it one more time? I'm sorry.
If Hillary's team was so concerned that Trump was going to reach out to people connected to the Russian government to get dirt against her, don't you think once they realized, which you acknowledge at some point they would have realized that's what happened, wouldn't it have behooved them to be honest with the American people and say, actually, we did the same thing we accused Trump of?
if they did exactly the same thing they accused Trump of, perhaps. But I'm
they did
again,
worse.
I'm part. Well, that's your argument. We're gonna dig into what Trump did specifically and what Trump's team did specifically, and we'll see if that holds up as well.
Did they get dirt from any Russians?
Did Hillary get dirt from any Russians?
No. Did Trump's team get any dirt that they were able to use from any Russians during the 2016 election?
Not for lack of trying.
Okay, but Hillary's team did.
Through legal channels, yes.
What's it matter if it's legal or not?
Well, we'll discuss that when we get to
if Hillary's team's claim was, oh my gosh, Trump's trying to communicate with people in the Russian government to get dirt on us, there's ways that you can do that that's legal. Trump's team never did it. They did, right? So if their claim wasn't, oh, he did it and he wasn't registered under FARA, their claim was he's working with Russians to get disinformation about us. And Hillary's team worked with Russians to get disinformation about Trump. And not only did they get it, they then sent it to the FBI, who then used it. I think illegally. We'll get to that portion later. So it's by any objective measure, when it came to colluding with Russians, Hillary's team did it far worse and more successfully.
Well, again, we'll see if that holds up. But I think an additional point to consider is that Danchenko, we talked about this as well, Danchenko was hired as a paid confidential informant by the FBI in 2017, which, again, that I think leads to more skepticism.
That's worse for you. What happened was,
I don't think so.
They paid this dude who they knew was spreading misinformation. So the IG, Michael Horowitz, said that actually, real quick, just so in case people don't know this, there was an inspector general report into both the FBI investigation into Hillary's team that was called the mid-year exam, and then into this, which was called Crossfire Hurricane, the Trump-Russia collusion stuff. The IG says that despite the fact that there was an FBI lawyer that literally changed evidence to the opposite of the truth to try to get a FISA warrant on Trump, that wasn't the worst thing. The actual worst thing was, after the second FISA warrant application, they finally reached out to Igor Danchenko, and what Igor Danchenko told them was, yeah, this is basically all bullshit locker room talk. We can't prove any of this. And what the FBI did was they went to the FISA court, which they are legally obligated to tell the truth to, and they said, we reached out to the primary subsource, and we believe he's telling the truth. But what they left out was, what he told the truth about was that it's all bullshit. They left that part out. That's why the last two FISA warrants are considered illegal. Even James Comey said, holy shit, had I known that, I would have never signed off on them. So it's the fact that the FBI paid this dude that they knew was saying, hey, yeah, this is all bullshit. And they paid him and then didn't tell the FISA court that he basically said it was all bullshit. Makes the case even worse, because to me, the primary villain in this story isn't Hillary Clinton or the DNC. It's the corrupt fucking FBI that decided to go after Trump for Russia collusion using evidence they got from Hillary's team colluding with Russians. So the fact they paid Danchenko is even worse.
Okay. So let's walk into the Donald Trump Russia collusion stuff now.
Just to be clear, we could do that, but this has nothing to do with the sentence in my note there at all.
I mean, it kind of does if the implication is that we should, because you keep saying Hillary did worse.
The same or worse, but I will argue worse.
The same or
yes.
worse. Mm-hmm. So what exactly? So you're saying that what Hillary did regarding her team hiring Perkins Cole, who hired Fusion, who hired Christopher Steele, who then used Danchenko as a primary source. This is worse than Trump Jr., Jared Kushner, and Paul Manafort taking a meeting in Trump Tower specifically to get dirt from the Russian government.
Yes, right. They actively, because Trump's team never got dirt, right? And Hillary's team did.
Not for lack of trying.
Okay, it doesn't matter. I don't think it's illegal to hear someone out and see if they have dirt. For all we know, Trump Jr. could have got that dirt and immediately went to the FBI and said, oh my God, this Russian told me that Hillary committed crimes. You should look into this. Nothing wrong with that. Perfectly legal. The difference is that the dirt that Hillary's team got was in fact disinformation that they did in fact use, and Trump's team did not get any disinformation and they did not use it. In addition to that, Trump Jr. meeting this lawyer, her name was Veselnitskaya. Do you know who her attorney was?
I don't think that's in my notes.
It was Glenn Simpson, the head of Fusion GPS. She had dinner with Glenn Simpson, the head of Fusion GPS, the very person that was hired by Hillary's team to compile this dossier. Veselnitskaya had dinner with him the day before the meeting in Trump Tower and the day after the meeting in Trump Tower. It almost looks like that they set this whole thing up. When Trump Jr. went in and started talking to her, she started rambling on about the Magnitsky Act. I can't pronounce shit. I'm a fucking redneck yinzer. I don't know how to pronounce this shit. But and they sat there for like 20 minutes. It was like, this is all bullshit, and walked out. But it seems like it was a plant. Yes, objectively, the fact that Hillary's team and the DNC actually got dirt that was disinformation from Russians and then used it is worse than Trump's team trying to get dirt on Hillary and not succeeding.
So just to be clear, you acknowledge that Trump Jr. accepted a meeting explicitly billed as being from a Russian government source to hurt Hillary Clinton and said, if that's
Correct.
what you say, or if it's what you say, I love it.
Yes.
Okay.
It's not a crime. There's nothing wrong with that.
I didn't say it was a crime. Yeah.
Yeah.
It does show, however, it does show readiness to conspire with a hostile foreign power. No.
Do you think that warrants an FBI investigation on its own?
I think it warrants an investigation.
Okay, then why didn't the FBI investigate Hillary's team once they found out that they did, in fact, collude with a suspected Russian spy, Igor Danchenko?
Well, again, that's your framing.
Okay, let's take out the suspected Russian spy. Yeah. He certainly was someone that everyone admits had connections to the Russian government.
Perhaps. Yeah, sure.
Okay, well, why isn't that then the same, like the hair in the back of your neck standing up? Oh, Trump Jr. agreed to listen to a Russian that he thought was connected to the government to get dirt in his opponent? That warrants an FBI investigation. Okay, Hillary's team actually did it in the DNC. Why no FBI investigation?
Well, again, Hillary's team didn't directly have contact with Danchenko, right?
So just to be clear, if Trump Jr. would have instead paid, say, a Republican law firm to have that meeting with Vetselnitska, you'd say, oh, that's reasonable. No need to investigate.
If he paid some law firm that then paid a separate organization, which then hired somebody who then had that meeting, I don't think I would have quite as much concern. I think Donald Trump Jr. directly meeting with Russian government sources, specifically to hurt Hillary Clinton's campaign, and I think that is just looks way worse.
It's a joke. It's the equivalent of saying, oh, if you attempt to murder your wife, you're a really bad guy. But if you hire a hitman to do it, it's just stupid.
I don't think it's the same as saying if you hire a hitman. I think that it's, again, doing general opposition research is pretty common in campaigns. Meeting with hostile foreign powers is less common.
Is this not a form of elitism? Have you ever considered running for government?
So you're getting at the point that that Donald Trump Jr. maybe didn't know what he was doing was
no, that's not it at all. I'm just asking you, have you ever considered running for government? I've ran for Congress. Did you ever consider doing something like that?
I'm not interested in running for office. No,
so me neither anymore now that I have a kid. Sure. But it might surprise you to know this, Ryan. I'm kind of broke. I'm not really a wealthy dude. So I didn't really have a team, right? So if I was doing campaign research, guess who was doing it? Me, right? So your argument is, if in that campaign research, someone comes to me who happens to be Russian and says, I have dirt in your opponent, that warrants an FBI investigation. But if I was wealthy enough to pay you to go do it, then it wouldn't warrant an investigation.
I don't think that's my argument.
What seems to be, you're saying as long as you pay someone, then it's okay. This would seem to disenfranchise people that don't have so much money that can't afford to hire law firms to do campaign research for them. There's no material reason why hiring an intermediary to get dirt from Russians should be allowed and not worth an investigation, but personally doing it yourself shouldn't be. It's nonsensical.
I think that we're kind of speculating when we say that Hillary hired the team specifically to get like info from Russian sources. Like the team did end up using a Russian source as a primary source for the dossier, but that doesn't mean that Hillary's team was seeking out Russian source. Like that's speculative, right?
Now, I don't think it's speculative because they were clearly looking for information that Trump was doing illegal shit with Russians. And I think we could both intuit. If you're being honest, don't you think that inevitably would lead to talking to Russians?
It likely would. Yeah, sure.
Okay. So they knew that they were hiring someone that was going to talk to Russians. They then got the dirt. They knew who it came from. They knew it was a Russian that had connections to governments. I think that this was a suspected Russian spy, and they would have known that as well. Fine, you want to leave that part out, no problem. But they got that dirt, knew where it was from, knew it was from Russians, then used that dirt, both leaking it to the press and sending it to the FBI. The FBI knew it was unverified, decided to use it to start an investigation right at that moment. If the FBI is like, oh shit, we need to investigate Trump because we think that he's possibly trying to get dirt on Hillary. Trump Jr., for example, tried to get dirt on Hillary from Russians. They have all the evidence they need right there. Oh shit, Hillary's team literally just got dirt on Trump from a Russian. We should investigate them as well. But they didn't for some reason. In fact, they instead used it to get illegal FISA warrants and then paid the very Russian person at question here. You sure you want to listen? Maybe you'd have better luck moving on to one other points. I could do.
I don't feel like I'm having bad luck right now.
It's a cat playing with a mouse. If you want to keep on this all night, perfectly fucking fine with it.
We'll keep moving through. I mean, I'm almost done with the Trump Russian. So the next one I would bring up is Paul Manafort stuff. So do you acknowledge that Paul Manafort, Trump's campaign chair, shared internal campaign polling with Konstantin, a Russian spy, during the campaign?
Prove that Konstantin Kilimnik was a Russian spy.
Okay.
What's the evidence?
Russian spy.
Was he a Russian spy when the Obama State Department was routinely engaged with him to help with diplomacy between Ukraine and Russia? If so, why did the Obama State Department routinely engage with him?
Report says Manafort associate is a Russian intelligence officer who may have helped coordinate Russia's hack and leak operation. This is NBC in 2020.
What's the evidence? What the Mueller report say? I can't remember exactly, but it's laughable. They're like the evidence was a joke that they had.
Okay, regardless of whether you think it's laughable, the Senate, do you acknowledge the Senate intel community found this to be quote unquote a grave counterintelligence threat?
I'll take your word for it. I don't remember that being the exact language. Irrelevant. Again, that's because
why is it irrelevant?
Because who's the Senate Intel Committee listening to make a claim like that?
I don't know. I assume that they have better sources than either of us.
It might be the intel agencies like the FBI, right?
Perhaps, yeah.
Okay, so if the FBI was crooked in the first place and knew that
Igor Danchenko that's again speculative.
It's not speculative. We know that they did all kinds of shit. Like the IG report.
Well, when I say it's speculative, I'm saying that like you're using your position of how corrupt and bad the FBI is to poison any sort of sourcing that may come from the FBI. Which there might be good reason to do certain things, but I don't think you can use it as like a sweeping blanket to just disregard any information.
Perhaps if I reframe, right? Kaj Patel's running the FBI right now, right?
He sure is, yeah.
You fan of his?
Author of the Plot Against the King, Kaj Patel. I like the song that came with the book. It's kind of catchy, but
nice.
No, I'm not a Kaj Patel fan. No, I wouldn't say so.
Now, right now, Republicans control the Senate, right?
Yes.
Okay, so if the Senate right now, the Senate Intel Committee that would be controlled by Republicans gets a report from Kaj Patel saying Democrats are colluding with China, you'd say that's the end-all be-all. We don't have to look exactly what the evidence is. All we have to do is acknowledge that that's what the Senate Intel Committee has said, correct?
I would take it seriously if that Senate Intel Committee still said that there was a grave counterintelligence threat.
How serious would you take it?
With Kaj Patel in particular, a little bit less with a grain of salt, but I think that he does try to use his position like he doesn't want to be under intense scrutiny for things like I think that there's at least going to be a defensible underpinning for the, and also I mean it's not I'm pretty sure that the FBI, has there ever been a Democrat in charge of the FBI?
Yes, I think that you understand how that question's sort of irrelevant to me because I don't look at it as Republican versus Democrat. I look at it as the establishment versus people that are seen as a threat against the establishment. Like so James Comey's a Republican. Do you think he's a Trump fan?
Well, he did release, or he did like reinstate the Hillary investigation 11 days before the election.
If you would like to walk down that road, if you think you're getting spanked here, if you want to fucking go,
I still don't feel like I'm being not in an unpleasant way, at least.
Oh, well, okay. Like I'm very heterosexual, so maybe I'll stop using the word spank. Maybe that's my fault in the first place. But nonetheless, it's clear that James Comey, this idea, well, he's a Republican, therefore it's all bullshit. I'm just asking you for evidence as to why Konstantin Kilimnik was a Russian spy. Just for the audience, for the sake of it, let's go through it. Paul Manafort, Trump's campaign manager, gave polling data to a Ukrainian guy that the FBI and the Mueller team was like, trust us, bro, this dude was a Russian spy. The same Ukrainian guy that the Obama State Department routinely worked with because they thought he was trustworthy enough to help them with diplomacy in the region. But all of a sudden, he went from someone that the Obama State Department totally trusted, just like that, to being a suspected Russian spy. No evidence given. Ryan can't give you what the evidence is, right? And what was the big crime? Okay, this sounds nefarious. Let's assume for a minute he is a Russian spy. Oh my God, what did Trump's team do to him? Gave them polling results that said, hey, we think we're going to win this thing. That's it. They didn't share classified information. They didn't share dirt on Hillary Clinton. They didn't make claims like, hey, once we're in there, we'll do XYZ for you. No, they just said, hey, we think we're going to win. As I explained to Ryan before, the reason for this was Kilimnik had previously worked with Paul Manafort. And Manafort is kind of a shady dude, but not in the sense that Ryan or the Democrats are saying. He's a shady dude in that he's trying to make money. So he's going to all of his old business partners saying, holy shit, we might win this. And I'm Trump's campaign manager. Wow, I'm going to be a big deal. We should do some business deals. That's what he's doing, not trying to collude with Russia to steal the election.
Well, I'm not accusing him of trying to steal the election. I'm saying that he
not trying to get dirt. Is there any evidence whatsoever that they asked Konstantin Kilimnik for anything?
That's not what I'm alleging here. So
okay, so what you're saying is when I say that Hillary's and the DNC colluded with suspected Russian spy Igor Danchenko to get dirt on Trump to prove that he got dirt from Russians. We're talking about Russian collusion. You're making this sort of non sequitur point to that statement that's like, well, isn't it true that Trump's campaign manager once talked to a Ukrainian that's accused of being a Russian spy and gave him polling data? Okay.
Gave him internal polling data specifically, and also, again, I'm quoting the Senate Intel Committee, which you can dismiss as much as you want, but they did find this specific interaction to be a grave counterintelligence threat, regardless of how you feel about it. I want you to
tell me why, though. Your fallacy of appealing to authority is unimpressive to me. Tell me in your own words.
I don't consider that an authority fallacy. I think usually when we, again, because I'm not even necessarily I'm not even making the argument that this absolutely was a grave counterintelligence threat. All I'm pointing out is that the Senate Intel Committee did identify it as a grave counterintelligence threat, which I think is a relevant detail.
I think the FBI and them were politicized. It doesn't matter. How will we resolve then our
doesn't matter to you, but I think what I'm saying is it might matter to other people.
We have a framing issue. We're both coming at it. We all both have bias. Everyone has bias. Perfectly reasonable. So how would we resolve who's correct here? I think the best way to resolve it would be okay, let's talk about what this grave threat could be. So I'm asking you in your own words. You don't have to do research.
Well, hang on. If we don't necessarily need to resolve anything, if all I'm saying, the only claim I'm making is that the Senate Intel Committee considered it a grave counterintelligence threat, regardless of what their reasoning was. I'm not making any claim about their reasoning. I'm just saying they did identify it as such. You're saying that is probably unfounded, which means that's kind of that would be more on you to make that
argument. My argument is that you agree with this in general. My argument is that Democrats in general, but establishment people, right, are biased against Trump. Right. And that's my argument. So people in the bureaucratic state, people in the FBI, even rhinos like your John McCain's or your Mitt Romney's, etc. Because we know, even though McCain wasn't financing the dossier, he was financing opposition research to Trump. You agree with that, right? He's a Republican, was still coming up with opposition research to Trump, right? My argument is these people are biased against Trump in various ways, and they're willing to use lawfare, etc., to go after him, right? And so when you say, well, the Senate Intel said that this was a grave intel threat, and I'm like, okay, but why? And you're like, well, it doesn't matter. I'm just saying they're saying that. That's proving my argument. You understand that, right?
I don't think it's proving your argument. I think if you assume that they are corrupt, you assume that everything they say is going to go against Trump with unreasonably so, even then you could believe that. But you could conclude that it's likely under your priors that is the case. But I don't think that proves it.
Okay, last thing. I don't want to hamper this, and I do want to let you control. But the last thing I'll say, if both me and you hear the government, it doesn't matter who's in charge, whatever. We just hear from an official government source, whether it be Intel Committee, President's administration, whatever, a claim that we both look at each other and go, that sounds like fucking bullshit, both of us, right? what utility does it have that the government, do we say, yeah, but still they said it, so there must be some truth to it? No, we would say, yeah, the government could lie as well, or they could frame things in a bad way to cover their own ass as well. And so all I'm asking you is real simple. Just take 30 seconds and explain to me what the thought process would be, how giving polling data would be a grave intel threat. That's it. Just tell me in your own words how that could be so.
How, I mean, you want me to just, again, so what you're asking me to do is speculate. This is what I'm not interested in doing, actually. This is kind of the issue I have, is that I'm not here to speculate. I'm trying to reflect the facts. And I want to point out when you are speculating, which you are doing a lot of right now, actually.
Again, if we both thought something was bullshit, if the government says something that defies credulity and we're like, that can't be true, we would say, then there must be something going on here. All I'm saying is you're making this statement, right? Mm-hmm. And you're like, your worldview that they were biased, corrupt, you have no proof of that. The proof that I'm offering is because they're saying shit like this was a grave intel threat, and I can't think of a reason why it would be, and neither can you. Why giving polling data is this serious intel threat? You can't think of it, and you're like, well, that's speculative. How else would we ever be able to determine whether there's bias or corruption at a government agency if we're not allowed to say, okay, at a bare minimum, is there a plausible explanation for their claims? You can't give anything. Nothing. You're just like, well, they said it. Again, so I'll leave it to the audience to resolve. My claim is I think that they were biased and this was bullshit, and Hillary's team clearly colluded with Russians worse than Trump's team for the reasons aforementioned. And your claim's like, yeah, but the Intel Committee said this was a grave threat that Paul Manafort gave polling data to a Ukrainian.
Okay, so this is, again, this is just ChatGPT, so grain of salt, but I was just curious. So it's like the answer I wanted to know, right now, since you're asking, and I'm also curious. Yeah. I'm curious, like, why they considered it a grave intelligence threat. So this is according to ChatGPT, why Manafort's conduct was considered a grave counterintelligence threat. Sharing of internal campaign data with Russian intelligence. Manafort regularly shared sensitive internal polling data, battleground state strategies, and campaign plans with Constantine. This data was not public and could be used to help Russia target disinformation or influence campaigns. Continued secret communication. Manafort and Kilimnik used encrypted apps and met in person, including a secretive meeting at the Grand Havana Room in New York in August 2016. The committee stated that Kilimnik may have been involved in Russian efforts to interfere with the election, making this an open channel between Trump's campaign and Russian intelligence. Manafort lied to investigators about his communications with Kilimnik, even after agreeing to cooperate in a plea deal. He deleted messages and hid the extent of their meetings, making it hard for investigators to fully assess the damage. The committee found evidence that Kilimnik may have been connected to the Russian intelligence operation that hacked and released democratic emails. While not definitive, the potential that campaign campaign data helped direct Russian efforts raised alarms. So that seems like a lot of.
If I could sum that up, the only part of that is potential and answer to my query would be this. Well, that data could have been used by Russians to target specific ad messaging in specific districts or states.
Sure, which is something they were pretty concluded they've been doing, right? During
Explain. How did they do that? What was
you don't think
efforts
that? You don't think there was? Yeah.
What was
there was active efforts?
Go ahead, show me what they were. Tell me.
I mean, there was like, what's that one Republican Twitter account that had like a massive amount of followers that was turned out to be a Russian operative? Are you familiar with this?
Are you talking about the guy that was running for like governorship? The guy that they spread all this information?
No. There was a GOP account, GOP Twitter. This is off the top of my head. So GOP Twitter account, Russia disinfo. What was the one? Russian Twitter account pretending to be. Oh yeah, it was Tennessee GOP fools celebrity politicians. This is from Chicago Tribune. Of course, it's going to say that I have reached my article.
What year is this? First off,
2017.
Okay.
This article.
And what's the claim?
Hang on one second. I can pull this up. I can pull up an archive link. So
I know there's been cases since then. Remember Roy Moore that was running for office and that he was accused of having all this shit. And it turned out that it was Democrats pretending to be Russians. Remember that? There was actually criminal cases about the Democrats that were pretending to be Russian bots. Nonetheless, let's assume all of this is true. So then your evidence that they were targeting specific districts is there were a bunch of bots following a Republican account, or that there was a Russian pretending to be a Republican? if I may, my knowledge of the Russian interference are as follows. Allegedly, the hack, which hasn't been proven and is bullshit. But other than that, it was they put campaign ads on Pokemon Go and Facebook. The numbers vary, but I think it was something like at the highest end, $200,000. Now, just think about this. This was an election that had over $1 billion spent. And we're to believe that Russians spending at most $200,000 on campaign ads on Facebook and Pokemon Go, half of which were pro-Democrat, things like BLM and LGBT issues, half of which weren't seen until after the election, right? And no proof whatsoever that they were directed by the Russian government. It was just through this agency called the Internet Research Agency that was out of Russia. That was the evidence that Paul Manafort giving campaign data to Konstantin Kilimnik may be a grave intelligence threat?
I don't think that it's that. Okay, so first of all, I want to say about the Pokemon Go thing. As someone who played Pokemon Go in 2016 and still plays Pokemon Go, I think anyone who did at the time would be very, very aware, keenly aware that everyone was playing Pokemon Go at the time. Okay, so this was massive. All right, this was world peace briefly in 2016 before Trump destroyed it all, right? Like we had a moment of just everyone was united around trying to figure out where the fuck Pikachu was, so to the idea that targeting ads through Pokemon Go is a silly thing. I mean, it is the largest media franchise in the world, the highest grossing media franchise on the planet. I think it's definitely a relevant detail. You say it kind of dismissively, but I think Pokemon Go was a pretty fucking big deal. But I want to point to the Mueller probe findings because you acknowledge surely that they did find sweeping Russian interference that was where Trump campaign members were expected to benefit.
Give me examples.
Let's see. Yeah. I'm sorry. Before I do, which I will pull up examples, but are you denying that the Mueller report found sweeping Russian interference, or are you just not aware that it did?
I think the Mueller report was written by partisan hacks, and a lot of the lawyers that were on there were people that were Democrats. Some of them actually people that had defended the Clinton Foundation before. I acknowledge that they did say that they found evidence that there was Russian interference. I'm unimpressed by what that evidence is. In the scope of an election that's billions of dollars, being able to say, well, there were a couple $100,000 of campaign ads on Facebook and Pokemon Go is not impressive. In my opinion, and you see if you agree with this, the most effective disinformation that was used to affect the 2016 election and thereafter, what was the most effective piece of Russian disinformation?
What are you suggesting?
I think it was Igor Danchenko's claims that not only were leaked out on the eve of the election in order to try to steal the election for Democrats against Donald Trump, but then were used to sabotage Trump's administration by having 4 years of investigations against him. That's by far worse than Pokemon Go ads.
Perhaps that is worse than Pokemon Go ads.
Why no FBI investigation?
Why no FBI investigation?
Yes. Why didn't the FBI not investigate?
So my understanding. So I've got a note here that says Mueller declined to charge conspiracy because it's legally narrow, not because no wrongdoing occurred.
It has nothing to do with my question. That has to do with why they didn't charge anyone in Trump's team with conspiracy or colloquial. You'll agree with this. I think the audience may not understand that. There's no crime of collusion, right? When people talked about collusion, they were talking about things like conspiracy to get dirt. But yeah, they didn't charge. And they could say, well, they didn't charge because it was hard to prove it, but not that there was no there. Again, I'm going through this and I'm talking to you about the evidence. You've already acknowledged that the most effective piece sounds like it was probably the stuff that came from the Russian Igor Danchenko that benefited the Democrats. In addition to that, there was evidence.
I don't think I bought. That was your assertion. I think
okay,
I don't
you
think I
said
necessarily agree
you
with that,
seemed to not be able to dispute. You were like, sounds right. So what piece of Russian help was more effective than that?
So I think that what was happening with the Mueller, I'm sorry, no, not with the Mueller. Excuse me. The IRA that you brought up, the IRA funded like social media manipulation. They did create thousands of U.S. social media accounts that posed as Americans targeting swing states. They promoted Trump, sowed racial division, and discouraged Democrat voter turnout, which is something we'll definitely come back to later, especially among Black Americans.
Okay, you think that was more effective than the Steele dossier?
I'm not sure. I mean, it's an interesting question.
Would you at least say that the Steele dossier had an effect, and would if the IRA putting ads on Facebook and Pokemon Go warranted an investigation, so should the Steele dossier, correct? You would acknowledge that.
I'm open to there being investigations either way. Yeah,
Was
I don't
there?
mind. I don't know why or why not, though.
Okay, there wasn't. And so my argument that there's a clear double standard, you're not.
It doesn't seem clear to me without more information. It doesn't feel that clear to me. Like, because there certainly could be reasons that there was an investigation done.
Right? Can I break like something that might blow your mind here and blow the audience mind? Okay, I think that you may be so biased that you're always going to paint Trump in a bad light and those against Trump in the best possible light. That's what it sounds like to me.
Okay, well, that's not what I'm doing, though,
right? The
right?
audience's mind, right? You want to move?
I think what I'm actually doing, regardless of how I feel about Trump, which I definitely don't like him, regardless of how I feel about him, I don't think I'm doing any sort of like, all I'm doing is trying to establish like core facts that I can kind of work within here. Like I'm not like making conclusions about Trump being like a Russian asset or that Trump is evil, or I'm not even talking about that. I'm just describing facts that like were involved with like Mueller investigation and that were involved with like the alleged Russian collusion on either side. I'm just identifying key facts. I'm not making sweeping claims. I'm not doing speculation like you've been doing a lot of.
Hey, I'm just going to try to give you a little advice here. You don't have to take it if you don't want. I'm happy to talk about point one all night. I think we're an hour in. We already talked about point.
I'm almost done. Yeah.
We talked about this same point 2 hours before. I don't think you've broken any new ground. I think the majority of the audience will think, wow, I don't see how anything Ryan's saying here disproves Rob's claim, right? Like you're now like, yeah, but Russians did, put ads on Facebook and Pokemon. What does that have to do with me saying that Hillary's team and the DNC colluded with the suspected Russian spy to get dirt on Trump? Like, I just think you would, surely there's better arguments you have on topics coming up. And I'm afraid we're not going to get to it. I'd kind of like for you to beat me on at least one of these topics. So, but if you want to stay here all night, I'm perfectly, half of the time has been used, you retreading the same arguments we've already had. That's on you though, man. You control the direction. Just giving some friendly advice.
Yeah. So just, first of all, with regard to the Pokemon Go, blah, 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 again, like, I think you're being very dismissive of the amount of Russian disinformation that was out there during this election. And I think that the Mueller report does actually, again, claim at least to have found sweeping Russian interference and said that Trump campaign members, quote unquote, expected to benefit, which seems quite interesting. Seems quite concerning, I would add, and that they allegedly declined to charge conspiracy because it's legally narrow, not because no wrongdoing occurred. And I think like the key, there's a quote by Mueller where he says, "If we had confidence that the president clearly did not commit a crime, we would have said so." So they didn't conclude no wrongdoing on Trump's part.
You're reading something probably from ChatGPT, which is fine. Far be it from Rob GPT to yell about you using it, but you're not really getting into the details of it. The last thing I'll say on this, and then
because again, I'm just naming key facts that happened. Right.
Okay. I think I'm pointing to the disposition of those facts, but nonetheless, I notice you haven't talked about the second sentence in there that says Hillary's office voted for Uranium One right around the time Bill Clinton, her husband, met with Putin and met with Putin and then got paid by a Russian owned bank $500,000. Do you think that's suspicious?
Perhaps. Do you acknowledge that that has been investigated thoroughly and no wrongdoing was found by the FBI, Congress, or even Trump's own DOJ?
I acknowledge that they claimed that they investigated. Yes, nonetheless.
So you're speculating that they did not actually investigate?
I didn't say that. I just said I
implied
acknowledge that
that,
they
right.
said they investigated. An investigation could take many forms. The veracity of that investigation. For example, there was an investigation into Hillary's email usage, which resulted in her team admitting that they destroyed subpoenaed evidence. And they said, oh, well, the FBI said, no big deal. Nothing to be done about that. The veracity, just saying, well, we opened an investigation is different than what the veracity was. I'm just saying, regardless of the legal matter, if we're talking about suspicion of people colluding with Russian and meeting with Russians and possibly getting something of benefit, Russians got 20% of our uranium rights around the same time that Hillary Clinton's office, when she was Secretary of State, her husband was personally meeting, not with Konstantin Kilimnik, but with Vladimir Putin, and then a few weeks later getting paid $500,000. You don't find that suspicious?
It could be.
You think that's worse than
but I'm not working up
to
suspicious.
Konstantin
Like,
Kilimnik?
seems weird. Like, I'm more like, I want to know like more specific, like actual
Yes
hard
or no?
evidence. Right?
But Ryan, yes or no, was not the entire point of me putting these notes up that when I'm talking to Democrats like you, and I'm not saying you personally, but Democrats that I debate like you, that would say something like, oh my gosh, Russia collusion, that was such a serious thing. Oh man, that's something that we should be concerned about. And it's like, okay, were you concerned when Hillary's office was signing off on 20% of our uranium rights to Russia? Meanwhile, her husband was personally meeting with Vladimir Putin and then getting paid $500,000? And your response to that is like, well, that's speculative. Right, but that's the entire point of this document I put together, if you remember, which you're accusing me of spreading misinformation. Nothing I've said thus far is misinformation, including that point. Why would I take seriously someone that says, I think we should look into, I'm worried about Trump trying to get dirt on Hillary or working with Russians. I'm worried about that. He might have got something with benefit. When his opponent's husband got $500,000 after personally meeting with Vladimir Putin right around the time that Hillary's office was selling them 20% of our uranium rights. That's exactly the sort of argument that I'm making, why I don't want to have these conversations with Democrats, because they're full of shit and they're bad faith. And we should laugh at them and ignore them because they don't give a shit about Russia collusion. They weren't curious at all when it was Hillary and Bill Clinton meeting with Vladimir Putin and getting money.
Okay, so personally, I just the idea of Russia having the rights to 20% of our uranium, that alone does concern me. It did concern me. I mean, I don't have like evidence. I can't prove it to you, but like like learning that has never sat right with me. I've never been like, oh, I haven't like really like figured out like all the specific. I've never done get into this enough until more recently. Before to like come to a better understanding of what actually happened there. But I'm certainly not thrilled about that being the case. I don't know exactly the justification for why, but I do know that it wasn't like determined by Hillary Clinton like unilaterally, right? It was reviewed by a 9-agency panel that included the Department of Treasury, Homeland Security, Commerce, and the State Department. But again, I guess you would argue that all of those are corrupt, and that's why they we're willing to do this.
We're rehashing again. It wasn't just
we didn't talk about this last time. So
no. Yes, I am saying that I think that they're biased, corrupt, etc. I am saying that, but for the purposes of what this document was compiled for and what you said was misinformation, that's completely irrelevant, right? I'm saying that individual Democrats that didn't have a problem with that, right, but then want to talk about Trump-Russia collusion are full of shit. They're bad faith. They don't really care about Russia collusion. And I remind you again. We're an hour in. We're literally, we had a 2-hour conversation on point 1 last time. Now we're an hour in and we're still on point 1. Again, I'm happy to retread. I'm happy to focus on this. Your call, though.
Yeah, I'm almost done with the uranium stuff.
Sarah, do you got 70 hours? You got 70 hours?
He said that last time. It's I don't mind. I have no issue. And also, if we don't get through all of the topics here during the hardcore part of the debate, we can always carry them over to the open panel. So they won't be left untouched.
Sure. So I guess to be clear, I mean, the reason I'm diving so deep into this is because it seems like it feels like a false equivalency, right? Is what like from my surface level understanding of all these things. Like when I can point at Donald Trump Jr. specifically agreeing to take a meeting in Trump Tower with the goal of getting a secret meeting that he lied about, right? A secret meeting, and then specifically with the goal of getting dirt on Hillary, saying that if it's what you say it is, I love it. He's meeting with Russian officials. That seems that if we're going to talk about collusion, a secret meeting like that with Russian officials seems pretty. That sounds like an easy case for collusion. What doesn't sound quite as easy is Hillary's team hiring a law firm, which then hired Fusion, which then hired Steele, which then used Danchenko as a source, who was at one point a suspected Russian spy, probably not still considered a suspected Russian spy in 2016. This is why this, like, I wanted to go through.
If I could just boil this down to one question, right? So the argument would be, it's evident that Trump's team was willing to use dirt from Russians to go after Hillary, and that's a problem.
Secretly meet. Well, okay. Again, regardless of what the lies, I am. It sounds concerning to me to have Trump Jr. meeting with Russian officials secretly with the goal of trying to find dirt on Hillary. Yeah, sure.
Well, but, okay. Well, we definitely know that at some point, even if it wasn't their goal, which I think is absurd to think, at some point, Hillary's team in the DNC actually found out that through intermediaries, the person they were getting dirt on Trump through was Russian, right? And they clearly were willing to use it because they did.
But being Russian is not the same thing as being part of the Russian government, right?
They knew that this was a person connected to the Russian government based on the allegations that were made within. And not only that, they would have known that at one point this person was accused of being a Russian spy.
Yeah, but then they would also know that the FBI had the opportunity to reopen that probe and never had. So it would kind of be suspicious, or it doesn't follow that they would necessarily like think, oh, this person is a like. And again, they're not. Again, when we talk about collusion, I think most people assume a more direct connection. But again, that's.
I'm happy.
I mean, we also talked about the Mueller report, which again considered that that specific the Paul Manafort sharing that info a grave threat, regardless of whether or not you agree with that. That again sounds concerning to me. Maybe it's because I hate Trump that I'm biased against him and I don't see these as equivalent, but I feel that there's a false equivalence happening here. We can skip over the rest of the
okay,
I have more notes on
I'll just say real quick, if there's a problem with trying to work with Russians to get dirt in your opponent when Trump's team does it, then there should be a problem when Hillary's team is actually successful in doing it and then uses that dirt. Democrats that didn't have a problem with the latter, I'm uninterested in their claims on the former. I was correct in the statement that I made here. There was no disinformation in anything that I said.
Again, I think that arguing that he was a suspected Russian spy at the time is at least shaky. I know you disagree. No, but it's pretty much implied, and we can disagree on that. But yeah, I just don't think that I don't think it's a fair equivalency. But we can disagree on that. That's fine. We can move on to the lawfare stuff.
Okay, number 2, lawfare.
Mm-hmm. All right, so let's talk about the illegal FISA warrants. Do you acknowledge that the FBI was criticized for sloppy paperwork, not a criminal conspiracy?
By who?
Just in general, except for maybe you. Do you have anyone who?
Well, you're getting that statement from somewhere. Who made that accusation?
Well, I'm saying that like the issues with the FISA warrants were largely. It seems like sloppy paperwork could be summed up as sloppy paperwork.
No, I don't acknowledge that. In fact, the IG, when asked specifically how all of this stuff could have happened, it is true that the Republicans sucked, and the Democrats were actually very good at hammering the same talking point over and over. You don't have evidence that this was intentional, that this was corrupt, right? And he's like, no, we didn't receive that amount of evidence. However, at one point when one of the Republicans got to ask IG Horowitz, he said, other than gross incompetence of the highest level or corruption, is there another explanation you could come up with that we saw all of these things that occurred that are troubling in the Russia collusion investigation? And Horowitz said no. Those are the only 2 possible explanations. He did not rise to the level of proving a conspiracy, but he did not say that there wasn't one. He just said he didn't have enough to charge that.
Okay, isn't that also true of the Mueller report, that same thing regarding Trump collusion?
That's sure. That's what they said. Now, you can see that I put an article in there from the Heritage Foundation. You acknowledge that says exactly what I says, that the probe found lack of probable cause. The DOJ admitted that there was a lack of probable cause, i.e. it was illegal. At least the second two FISA warrants were illegal. They did not have probable cause. So they got a FISA warrant. And just so you and the audience understands, what a FISA warrant is, it allows the government to basically spy on you and take away your Fourth Amendment, because they're accusing you of being a spy for a foreign adversary. And so the threshold for this, for a regular American, should be immensely high. Unfortunately, the FISA court's basically just a rubber stamp. But when you're talking about being able to spy on a campaign for presidency, and then later for the president, to spy on the president and his administration, the threshold should be through the roof. And they're admitting, our bad, we didn't have probable cause. Even if I accept that, well, it was just a paperwork error, where does that dispute what I'm saying? They didn't have probable cause. If you get spied on by a police force and it turns out that they had paperwork errors to do it, isn't that illegal?
I think it was determined to be illegal eventually.
Okay, so then where's my statement? Again, what you're trying to prove here is that I'm spreading misinformation. So far you've said, yes, actually, you're right. They did find it to be illegal. Okay.
Wait, hang on. Well, okay. So first of all, you're claiming the lawfare stuff. Besides the illegal FISA warrant, is it Democrats weaponized absurd lawfare to go after Trump? So
correct.
Calling it absurd lawfare, I think is already like that's a much stronger claim.
Now,
than
I did premise, I don't know if I said it in my opening statement, but I did say it to, I think, both of you before, and I certainly said it to my audience before, that you would make semantical arguments with, and this is a really good one, that you're now taking umbrage with the word absurd. Yes, the Democrats did weaponize lawfare to go after Trump, but I don't think it was absurd. I mean, come on.
Well, I'm not agreeing to the lawfare. I'm not agreeing to the lawfare or the absurdity. So.
Okay, I think it's absurd. I think illegal FISA warrants to spy on Trump's absurd.
Okay, so it was eventually determined to be illegal because of I would
that
consider
is correct, sir.
Warrant.
Do you think that the FBI? But would you acknowledge that getting a FISA warrant to spy on someone, let alone a presidential campaign, is a big deal?
Sure.
Do you think that the FBI, before getting a warrant like that, should have to have a very good reason for doing so?
Sure.
And don't you think if one of that reasoning, the bulk of that reasoning was coming from the opponent of the very person that you're trying to get his FISA warrant on, that you would want to verify some of those claims before you get the FISA warrant?
I imagine you would want to verify some. So, like, for example, there was 34 indictments and 7 convictions from the Mueller report, including for Trump's campaign chair, which sounds like pretty sussy behavior, right?
Two things. One, none of those had to do with illegally colluding with Russians to affect the 2016 election. And secondly, even if they did, that's irrelevant to this FISA warrant that we're talking about that was issued against Carter Page that would have allowed them through the two-hop rule to spy on the entire Trump presidency, right? Even if it's true that Paul Manafort did some bad shit. Again, if you're trying to get a FISA warrant to spy on a presidential campaign and then later a presidential administration, and you're using evidence that's crucial for that came from his opponent, shouldn't you attempt to verify that evidence before you use it to get that warrant?
Do you acknowledge that the inspectors general found no evidence of political bias in opening the Russia probe?
What he found was that there was a legitimate let me think the exact language. I'm not going to remember the exact language. He said that there was a sufficient predicate for opening an investigation. But will you acknowledge that he also says that the predicate for the FBI opening an investigation is remarkably low for any investigation?
If he said that, sure, I would. Yeah.
Either him or Durham said that. The problem's not that there was an investigation. The problem is the tools that they used in that investigation. I have no problem with the FBI taking a cursory look at potential Russia interfering in an election. What I have a problem with them is them getting illegal FISA warrants to spy on the president's team. That's the problem. Not that there was an investigation. What you're doing is saying, well, there was a reason to have some sort of investigation, so they got illegal FISA warrants to spy on Trump's team. Oh, well. No, it doesn't work that way. Similarly,
are you suggesting that it was like criminal in nature?
I'm suggesting that the FISA warrants were illegal.
Yeah, but like criminal in term like criminally illegal, or just like against protocol.
it's semantical. I don't know what crime you would specifically charge. I hope that there is a relook at this and we find out that there is evidence that this was a conspiracy against Trump, which the preponderance of evidence strongly suggests. For example, Peter Strzok, that was the lead agent on both the investigation into Hillary, the mid-year exam, and the lead investigator in Crossfire Hurricane, was tweeting to his lover, Lisa Page, that was also on the team, they needed an insurance policy to stop Donald Trump. There's clearly motive. There's clearly all sorts of actions, including illegal FISA warrants that were inexcusable that were done against Trump. Meanwhile, simultaneously, the exact opposite behaviors occurring in their investigation of Hillary. They're being as easy as possible. So when you have these agents saying, we want Hillary to win, we need an insurance policy to stop Trump, we're going to give every benefit of the doubt to Hillary's team in our investigation of her, and we're going to go as hard as possible against Trump, even getting illegal FISA warrants, it strongly suggests that this was done intentionally. But the only other explanation, will you acknowledge this? If it wasn't, because you acknowledge that there was grotesque behavior that occurred, right? The IG report suggests that.
I don't know if I would characterize it as grotesque.
Okay, grotesque is a term of art, I guess. You acknowledge that there were serious violations of FBI protocol in the investigation of Trump.
It does appear so, yeah.
Okay, so would you also acknowledge, as the IG Horowitz said, that the only two explanations were that there was a corrupt aspect of this, that they wanted, their bias meant that they wanted to help Hillary and hurt Trump, or that they were grossly incompetent? Can you think of a third explanation?
I'm sorry, can you ask again? See, another thing I pointed out in my opening statement is that sometimes even when you're saying stuff I don't necessarily disagree with, I sometimes get lost when it's happening fast. So,
okay, no problem. Please. Will you acknowledge that the only explanations for that you could come up with would be either that there was corruption by the FBI or that they were grossly incompetent?
I'm open to more. I'd be open to someone giving me a more nuanced explanation.
Such as, give me a hypothetical. Sure what a third explanation could be. The IG disagreed with you.
I don't feel like that's an exhaustive list of possibilities. Is all I'm saying. So I don't feel obligated to come up with a.
I've racked my brain, and as has the IG. For example, one of the things that occurred was Kevin Kleinsmith, one of the top lawyers for the FBI, asked the CIA, hey, did this guy Carter Page that we're getting this FISA warrant, did he ever work with you guys and help you go after Russians? And the email that he gets in response from the CIA is yes. And Kevin Kleinsmith, a top lawyer at the FBI, changes it to no. Now, what's the possible explanations for that?
Change it. So he got the answer yes, and he changed it to no?
Right. He altered evidence to the opposite of the truth. By the way, this was a guy who was messaging his friends, #resist, was a big Hillary fan. He was actually convicted of this, given a slap on the wrist, but convicted. Okay. So the argument
so he was charged.
Okay. How would that dispute my point, right? The argument that I hear that I'm so tired of, no, Rob, it's absurd to think that the FBI was biased and corrupt. That's absurd. They're just so grossly incompetent that they do shit like change evidence to the opposite of the truth because they didn't know better. Whereas any second grader that's watched an episode of fucking Law and Order knows that you can't do that. But somehow the top FBI lawyers, they didn't know. They didn't know that you couldn't do that.
I think that a second grader who's watching Law and Order would probably feel like I do, that there is an incredible amount of legal nuance surrounding these things, and that jumping to assertions and like I need a lot of evidence for a very strong claim, right?
I would just suggest, please keep that same skepticism on your head anytime you're criticizing Trump or the Trump administration. Let's see if you're willing to jump through those hoops when it comes to you being critical of them. My guess is that's not the case.
Okay. Well, I mean, I guess we'll see if we come up with examples of that. But that, again, sounds like more speculation from Rob. So in terms of the novel law, so my understanding, or here's my notes here, at least. The Bragg case was legally complex, but not unprecedented. So New York routinely elevates falsified business record charges to felonies when used to conceal another crime like tax fraud or campaign finance violations.
Can you show me this? You acknowledge I don't have all the facts in front of me, but the Bragg case going after Trump, this had to do with the payments to Stormy Daniels, right? It was a misdemeanor that was beyond the statute of limitations, right? So they changed it to say, actually, he committed a crime by falsifying documents to commit the misdemeanor, right? That way that the statute of limitation wasn't ran out. So far, we're both in agreement?
I think so. Yeah, I mean, they owe to campaign finance violations, which is what it was charged for, right?
I debated this at the time. It's been a while, but it was something like this, that there was 3 parts to their claim, that they had to prove these 3 parts in order to make this a felony. The first part was that Trump falsified documents, his team falsified documents. The second part was to affect the election. And the third part was while committing some sort of other crime, such as tax crimes, falsification of other documents, etc. Does that sound right, that there were 3 parts to this? You agree with that?
I'm not aware, but sure.
Okay. I believe that was the case. I thought it was universally accepted. Perhaps you have information that I was unaware of.
I just don't know the details.
Can you show me that ever occurring in New York or any other state that's ever occurred, that they've charged someone with a crime using those 3 platforms like that?
Just like that, I'm sure I can't. But I mean, it doesn't mean it never has happened. But
if it has,
the claim that I made specifically, just to be clear, the claim I made specifically is that New York routinely elevates falsified business record charges to felonies when used to conceal another crime, for example, tax fraud or campaign finance violations. That's the claim I did make.
My claim is that if it's never been done, the exact legal framework that they did, that would you acknowledge if it had never been done, then it is a quote novel theory. In other words, new, it's not been done. They may have done things like that, but this particular theory had never been used. I'm not asking you to admit, yes, it had never been used. I'm asking you to admit if it had never been used, then my statement is correct, that it was a novel legal theory.
Okay, so your specific claim was it was a made up novel law to go after Trump, or a made up novel law to go after Trump, which I think if there's a lot of legal precedent for that sort of thing, I think a lot of times we have like very hyper unique scenarios, right, that require that do require quote unquote novel. I don't think novel means is like a damning thing, but sure, yeah.
Okay.
Characterize it as novel.
So this was new. If you could provide evidence, I would happily eat crow on this. If you could show me this happening, I think that pretty much everyone, even like the legal analyst, Ellie Honing, I think was his name, the head CNN legal analyst, I think he admitted that it was a novel theory. I think pretty much everyone admits that. But let's take this in a different direction. So the claim was basically that Trump committed a campaign finance violation, correct? Because he had paid Stormy Daniels, and the way that the payment occurred was that actually his lawyer, Michael Avenatti, made that. Or I'm sorry, Michael Cohen. Avenatti is the other guy. His lawyer, Michael Cohen, made that payment. Yes? Or you
I
don't
believe
know?
so.
Okay.
Then
it was a campaign contribution because that was to benefit the campaign, right? Paying off Stormy Daniel. And Michael Cohen, because he used his own money, that was contributing to Trump, basically. And so then they falsified the records by saying this was just for normal legal expenses. But in reality, it wasn't for normal legal expenses. It was to help with the campaign. It was a campaign expenditure. And there's a limit on how much an individual. Right. Okay. Would it shock you to learn that in the exact same district, in the exact same election, Hillary Clinton's team did exactly that? Would that shock you to learn that?
Perhaps.
So the FEC, actually, Hillary settled for this, but the FEC took a settlement for Hillary's team way before the Bragg case that showed, and you know this because we talked about it last time, that they had improper paperwork. They said when they were paying Fusion GPS, it was for like legal fees or something, but actually it was for campaign research. So they had to pay
hang on. Okay, real quick. You're saying improper paperwork versus falsifying business records.
Well, that would be falsifying.
I think I'm not 100% sure. You might be able to characterize it that way. I'm not 100% sure that that maps on perfectly. Okay, but also,
I'm sorry.
I think the intent probably is a big part of it, which I imagine is why a grand jury found probable cause to indict Trump on 34. On the
how would you prove the intent?
I don't know. I assume the jury had something like about that in mind.
How would police or a grand jury, how did it even get to a grand jury? What would be the necessary steps that you would, if you're saying, well, wait a minute, before you file a charge like that, you would have to prove intent.
I'm sorry. I'm saying that that's like, I'm saying that intent is probably part of why the conclusion came to him actually like being convicted of those felonies.
Wouldn't a necessary precursor to that be an investigation being opened? So, for example, it would be very hard to know what someone's intent was if there's never a legal investigation in the first place, right?
Sure. You're saying there was never a legal investigation,
exactly what
but there was a legal investigation into the Hillary stuff, right? Because she got less charged. She got the fine, right? Or the Hillary,
FEC
the DNC ended up paying the $100,000 fine, right?
Untrue. The FEC doing a campaign finance violation is different than Alvin Bragg, who apparently was very concerned going like what at this point, like 4 years back, 5 years back, he was very concerned about improper paperwork. And he said, this warrants scrutiny. Let's investigate. Why didn't he do it with Hillary's team if he knew that they also filed improper paperwork?
It sounds like there was in fact investigation into that, which is why she ended up having to pay
There was not an investigation into whether or not that she improperly filed paperwork to affect the election by some other crime. They did not do that. That's why it's important. Bragg did a novel legal theory. On one hand, right, like, and by the way,
was he charged with impacting the election, or was he charged with campaign finance violations specifically?
Who, Trump?
Yeah.
It was this like 3-part thing, right? He was charged with falsifying records to affect the election through the commission of another crime. But that's exactly what Hillary's team, it looks like they did. The difference is Bragg chose to investigate Trump, but chose not to investigate Hillary. The fact that the FEC looked into this, that's not a criminal investigation. Bragg is charging felonies. So is your argument here, well, as long as someone gets a civil penalty of fine, even if they committed felonies, Bragg would have no interest in looking into that? Because I wouldn't have had a problem if Bragg said, hey, Trump, tisk, tisk, that was a campaign finance violation. You owe us $100,000. But that's not what happened. He charged him with like 37 felonies, right? Which then the Democrats used as Trump's committed 37 felonies for committing the same crime that we know Hillary's team did. And yet Bragg didn't investigate.
I'm not entirely sold on your characterization that Hillary did the exact same crime.
The FEC disagrees.
Okay. I don't think so. I don't think they agree that the same exact thing happened. But I know that there was a fine that was paid, so there was like some sort of at least I guess maybe a civil investigation or whatever you call it.
Do you think, given the facts that we see with Hillary's team, should there have been an investigation by Bragg, who's doing criminal investigations, not civil fines like the FEC? Should he have investigated Hillary to see what her intent was?
Perhaps. I don't know why they didn't. So I'm kind of agnostic.
We know why Democrat Alvin Bragg did not investigate Hillary Clinton.
Well, you're speculating this because he just loves Hillary and hates Trump, right?
No, I'm speculating it has nothing to do with loving Hillary, just like all of you people.
Or sorry, because he hates Trump primarily.
That's right. All of you people's central political ideology is Orange Man bad. And you don't give a shit if random Democrats go down with the Orange Man. You just care to go after Orange Man. This was clearly a political stunt and an entire campaign season filled with lawfare political stunts to go after Donald Trump and tie him up with lawfare. Fortunately, it backfired on all of you. Now we have our great President Trump. Hopefully he'll run for a third term. That would be fantastic. Trump 2028.
Well, he very likely will. So I guess, we'll see. I mean, he's definitely he's demonstrated that he doesn't like leaving office when he's supposed to. So, well.
Do you want to keep on the lawfare? You want to go to part 3 on the lawfare? Leticia James?
Yeah, sure. So Leticia James ran on a platform of accountability, especially for wealthy fraudsters like Trump, but her civil fraud case didn't rely on rhetoric. It relied on documents, testimony, and a judicial ruling.
Okay, yes or no? My claim was she ran while she was campaigning on getting Trump.
Let me look at the specific. Sure.
Okay, so where's the misinformation in my statement?
So to be clear, once again, I'm not accusing every single thing here of being misinformation. My main contention, I mean, I don't think I ever said every single thing in Rob's everything in Rob's document is a lie. I don't think I ever made that claim. I don't think I ever would make that claim. I think what the more nuanced claim I did make early on in the intro was that when you're going very fast and stacking claims that sound stronger together than they are alone, I think it's important to untangle that and separate the signal from the noise. Those are my exact words.
But wasn't
and I would agree when it's fair, pause when it's murky, and at the very least, make sure we know what we're arguing about.
Okay, but wasn't it true that the entire reason for this, the reason I sent you the document in the first place, was the great Sara Tomato hosted a panel. You came on afterwards in the open panel, and you gave this soliloquy about Rob spreads misinformation, which resulted in me sending you this document. Of course, you're not going to say every statement I said was misinformation, but the audience and me were hoping you'd find one example. So you might say,
again,
okay,
I think I still think
misinformation.
Yeah. Well, I think the suspected Russian spy collusion, that Hillary colluded with a suspected Russian spy, I think that's misinformation. I don't think that was demonstrated at all. I think, in fact, that was quite a stretch. I don't
think he did so well on that.
There.
I'm just making the point. I'm just making the point. Each of these that you go through, I'm like, where's that misinformation? And if you're like, well, I'm not really saying it is, great. I'm waiting for you to prove that you believe that you won the first point. I think I and almost everyone with half a brain or more would agree that you didn't win that first point.
I believe you feel that way, sure. The second one that I would point to as what I would identify as misinformation is saying Democrats weaponized absurd lawfare to go after Trump. I don't think that has been demonstrated either. So that's two.
I think I proved my point. You want to move on to the third one?
Third that I would identify as misinformation, or the third section?
Whatever section you want to go to. I'm just saying, do you want to move on from this section? There's 18 other points, but it's up to you again. Sure. Okay.
Let's move to obstruction and mishandling of classified documents.
Okay. So I said the third example of sort of Democrat hypocrisy was Democrats that claim to care about obstruction of justice. Okay, go ahead.
Wait, where does it say that?
Well, the entire document.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, it does. Yeah, I see. No, I see. Obstruction. Yeah, my bad.
So I said Hillary's team destroyed subpoenaed evidence. Agree or disagree?
Yes.
Okay, they did.
I'll agree. Yeah.
Okay, Biden's ghostwriter destroyed tapes once he found out there would be an investigation into Biden. Agree or disagree?
Let's see. I think so.
Okay, that's the only two statements I made there. If you
sure.
want
Do you
to
acknowledge? So just to be clear, though, do you acknowledge that Biden's ghostwriter cooperated with investigators and the DOJ has not charged him with obstruction?
Of course, the DOJ that also didn't charge Biden because he was an old infirmed man. Yes, also didn't charge his ghostwriter, who admitted it.
Couldn't Trump's DOJ now have done that though?
They suppose they could if they chose to.
Why do you think they won't?
Because they find it irrelevant, because Biden's a sad old man that's irrelevant at this point, and they're actually trying to get shit done that's good for the country. I don't know, because they're not interested in using lawfare to the extent that Democrats were.
Well,
that sort of, don't you think that disproves the official Democrat talking point? Let me turn the question to you. If Trump's this tyrant that's abusing the legal system to go after his opponents, then why haven't they gone after Biden and his ghostwriter yet?
I don't think they have a strong enough case to do it, and I think that they are limited by the legal system.
I'll bet if he does, if they do open an investigation, you and the other Democrats will throw your arms up and go, here we go, Trump's corrupt, using lawfare to go after. So on one hand, you're like, well, if this was wrong, Trump's team would investigate it. And on the other hand, if he investigate, you'll say, oh my goodness, this is Trump using lawfare, Gestapo. It's a joke.
So I think what you'll actually hear from me is, oh, okay, what are they charging with and what's the evidence?
Let's talk about the first one real quick. Hillary's team destroying subpoenaed evidence. That's worse than any obstruction Trump was accused of, correct?
I don't think so. No, Trump specifically, he was even lying. He requested to move and hide the documents that were nuclear. Some of them were nuclear documents. These were, he even lied to his own lawyers about it and stuff. I think that, yeah, a lot of stuff regarding Trump is
first off, it was alleged. The court case never came out, so we never heard Trump's side of it. We just heard the Jack Smith side of it, who hates Trump, was appointed by Biden, right? That's number one. But secondly, whatever Trump was accused of doing, do you acknowledge that they eventually got all the documents that they requested?
Eventually, after refusing to return them, instructing aides to move boxes, bragging about having classified docs and showing them off to guests, yes.
Okay. let's try it this way. If Trump, instead of telling Nada, his assistant, to move boxes, if he would have said, or if Nada instead would have said, you know what? I'm just going to take all these boxes of shit in the garage and burn it. Then you would say it's not that big of a deal, correct?
Right. Obviously not. No.
Okay,
but yeah,
well,
you're bringing it to the Hillary Clinton thing, right? But
none
of the emails that none of the emails were marked classified at the time, right?
How do you know?
The email, because a lot of these have been recovered.
It. That's not true. They haven't been. They haven't.
I think they have been, actually. Hang on.
But perhaps I'm wrong on this. Maybe I'll learn something tonight.
What emails were recovered?
They were deleted by Paul Combato. Just in case the audience is wondering, there was a subpoena, a lawful subpoena from Congress for these emails of Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton's tech guy has a meeting with Hillary Clinton's top lawyer, Cheryl Mills. 2 days later, he's driving to work. Probably the most important job this guy ever had, tech guy who now has to cooperate with a congressional subpoena. And he, in his own words, has an oh shit moment and remembers that 6 months ago, he had a conversation with Cheryl Mills and she said, you should delete that stuff. So he knowingly commits a felony by deleting subpoenaed evidence, knowingly commits a felony because he was embarrassed that he was supposed to delete that shit 6 months ago. When the FBI says, okay, but what did you talk to Cheryl Mills about a few days before you deleted that? He says, I don't know. And the FBI says, good enough for us. You got total immunity, baby. That's it. That's what happened.
Sorry, switch headphones. But yeah, those 31,000 emails that were deleted were the ones marked personal, right? And then she did turn over the 30,000 work-related emails.
I don't know. So I know this. I can't speak directly what you're saying, but see if this answers your question. At first, she was determining which emails were relevant. It later turned out that she was some of the ones that she didn't initially turn over actually did have relevancy, some of which were classified material. So we're just taking her word when they say, because these emails have never been recovered, she was like, trust me, bro, it was all emails about yoga and shit. But they never recovered them. So with Trump's team, they moved boxes, but then got it, right? With Hillary's team, they literally deleted, after a subpoena, deleted the emails requested. And now you're like, yeah, but it's cool because we'll take her word for it that they were personal. It wouldn't matter if it's personal or not. Let me ask you this. If I'm under investigation by the FBI and they say, you have until 12 o'clock tomorrow to hand over your computer server, and I blow up the server and say, trust me, bro, it was all personal shit. Wasn't anything relevant to this investigation? Do you think the FBI would go, oh, okay, reasonable, as long as you tell us it was personal? Of course not. That's the whole point of a subpoena. It's not her decision to decide what's relevant. It's the people that are subpoenaing the documents.
Well, and I think even at that, like, they can do a time frame too, like, and it has to be specifically declared when they're doing that type of stuff. So yeah, that doesn't make sense to me.
It's a lawful subpoena. You can't destroy subpoenaed evidence and say, but I didn't think it was relevant to you. I don't give a shit if you're Hillary Clinton or if you're Rob Noerr or anyone in between. You can't do that. Unless you're Hillary, I guess, then you can, because they give everyone immunity. While at the same time, all I'm saying is that is more of a clear case of obstruction of justice than anything Trump was accused of. So again,
Trump
if you go back,
specifically refusing to return the documents.
There's a lot. We could get into the exact explanation of what's going on. Trump was cooperating. Trump's side is, I was cooperating. They were unreasonable. There were FBI agents that spoke up and said they thought it was absurd that there was a raid on Mar-a-Lago, that they thought that that was months
warranted. After the documents were requested to return, right?
He had allowed the FBI in several times, or I don't know if it was, I think it was the FBI, several times to look for stuff. There's this accusation that was never proven that he allegedly told this dude to move boxes. Again, all of this is flimsy and unproven. With Hillary's Clinton, we have a clear cut subpoenaed evidence. They destroyed it, right? And my claim is, if you're a Democrat and you're like, oh my God, I'm so concerned about Trump hypothetically obstructing justice, this is an outrage, but you didn't share that same feeling when it came to Hillary's team, literally obstructing justice in the most blatant way possible, getting a subpoena and then deleting the subpoenaed material, then you're full of shit and you're bad faith, and I don't give a fuck what you think about Trump obstructing justice, because you clearly don't care about obstruction of justice. You only care about Orange Man bad. That's my entire argument of why I was putting this together.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. I'm not convinced though that this is. Yeah, I'm not
sure
convinced
you're
those
not.
are the same. But I understand why you feel that way. Yeah, in terms of the recovery efforts, definitely they recovered several thousand deleted emails, most of them through forensic tools, email backups, and devices used by Clinton aides. Emails forwarded to other officials. This is from the FBI 2016 investigation. So they did recover at least several thousand of the deleted emails. What was in the recovered emails? No evidence of intentional deletion to hide classified info. 110 emails across 52 chains that did contain classified information at the time they were sent or received, mostly from the non-deleted batch. Only 3 email chains from the deleted set contained information marked as classified and not at the highest levels. So this
But
from
that,
James
doesn't that
Comey.
just prove? I mean, I don't even have to prove that it was classified, but doesn't that disprove? Oh, it was all work shit. It wasn't relevant. There were at least 3 email chains that were relevant, and not only were they relevant, contained classified information, and they only recovered a small portion. So how do we know what was in the portion that they didn't recover? And it's irrelevant anyways. It doesn't matter if it was all yoga emails. It was subpoenaed. You don't get to make that.
So why did Comey say that? Why did Comey say that no reasonable prosecutor would bring charges due to lack of intent and precedent?
Because Comey wanted Hillary to win.
And that's why he released that's why he reopened the probe 11 days before the election, because he wanted
I'm so happy you brought this up. So here we go. I've had this debate with like a dozen people, including Destiny, and smacked them around. Okay, if you go to the IG report, here's what happened, right? There was a whistleblower. You remember this guy, Anthony Weiner? He was dating Huma Abedin, Hillary Clinton's assistant and possibly lesbian lover, but we don't have to go there. Okay, that was Anthony Weiner, right? So once the case is closed, right, what happens is it turns out that all the while the FBI found a bunch of emails going through Hillary's team on Anthony Weiner's laptop. I believe the number was like 500,000, right? And so it's like, uh-oh. We were told these are the people that have the emails. This is all the emails. Case closed. Turns out there's 500,000 still out there on this dude that wasn't part of the team. Uh-oh. What are we going to do? So they did nothing. And so a whistleblower testified that he actually went outside. He contacted James Comey. He contacted the second in command, Andrew McCabe, was like, what are we doing? What are we doing? It's been a month. What are you doing? What are you doing? And he thought that what was going on was that James Comey and the FBI were purposely running out the clock. And so he went outside the FBI to the Southern District of New York. James Comey admitted in both his book and I believe in the IG testimony that he thought that Hillary Clinton was obviously going to win the election. And he was worried that it would look bad for the FBI and for Hillary Clinton if the American people found out after the election, oh, actually, there were all these other emails that the FBI didn't look on. They had the computer. They told us the case was closed, but they didn't look at these. And all of a sudden, Hillary's campaign and the FBI would be accused of conspiring together in order to cheat to win the election. So because James Comey thought Hillary's already going to win, he was like, okay, we'll reopen the investigation because he was worried about this whistleblower. So he reopens the investigation, and we're told they went through 500,000 emails in 3 days, even though if you try to request Freedom of Information Act and legally, the FBI claims they can only go through about 100 emails a day, but somehow they went through 500,000 in 3 days and said, yeah, nothing to see here, good as gain. So the reason that James Comey interfered wasn't to reopen the investigation wasn't to hurt Hillary, quite the opposite. It was to help Hillary. Unfortunately, it may have backfired on him, but he didn't do it
as you would expect it to. As any reasonable person would expect it to, right?
No.
Like opening a probe into a presidential candidate 11 days before the election is probably not going to reflect well on that candidate, regardless of how you frame it.
Not if you think that there's a 99% chance that Hillary Clinton's going to win, which was the prevailing narrative through like most of our mainstream media and through our intel agencies and people like James Comey. They thought she had it in the bag. And so they're doing a cost-benefit analysis. Look, this might slightly harm her, but the only reason it's going to slightly harm her is because we've been protecting her and hiding this evidence. But this whistleblower might come out. Hell, they may have even been worried that
protecting her.
They may have, that was the claims of the whistleblower. They may have even worried that the whistleblower would go public before the election. Then how bad would that hurt Hillary's chances? The FBI is covering up for Hillary Clinton with this investigation. Imagine that came out 3 days before the election, what that would have done. So James Comey's like, I'll get ahead of the story. I think she's going to win anyways, and I'm worried that this story will harm her once she wins, and it will harm my credibility and the FBI credibility. So I'll just come out and say, yeah, we'll look at this. Okay, we looked, nothing to see here, case closed. That's what they did.
So you're saying that they reopened the investigation for no other reason than to avoid looking corrupt.
I'm telling you that James Comey's words in the IG report. That's what he said. He said that I assumed Hillary was going to win. I was worried that it would come out after the election, that we sat on this evidence and didn't investigate it, and that it would look really bad for Hillary and it would look really bad for me and the FBI. So we figured we'll open it real quick. It got closed real quick. End of story. That's why he did it. You're the one who's saying, oh, clearly James Comey, who I don't understand. How many pictures of I'm with her, 8647, etc. do we need to see from James Comey before you realize the dude doesn't fucking like Donald Trump?
I mean, I'm not accusing Comey of liking Donald Trump necessarily.
But we're speaking to Comey's intent, right? You're saying, well, if Comey wanted Hillary to win and wanted to help Hillary and hurt Trump, why did he reopen the investigation? It's clear that Comey's wanted Hillary to win. It's undoubtable. It's undoubtable. And so the counter argument would be he was pretending to want Hillary to win.
It kind of sounds more like he's like just trying to make the case that it wasn't politically charged, which is it could be fair. Could be fair, like to say it wasn't. But like when he says, assuming as nearly everyone did, that Hillary Clinton would be elected president in less than 2 weeks. What would happen if it was later revealed after the fact that she was still subject of an FBI investigation? That's what he said.
Old Rob spread his misinformation,
and then she was
directly.
Okay. To be clear, Rob, the things. Hang on, but because we're gonna keep running into this. When I accused you of spreading misinformation, it was because I'd only seen I'd only come to looked at a handful of these, right? And including the suspected Russian spy thing, which I have maintained was disinformation or was misinformation. So that was like the instigating one, right? And I still stay by that. So when I made that claim, that was the thing I was focusing on.
I think your case
and again, I think and what I came to point out tonight is that there's a lot of detail, a lot of stuff that you're doing that's speculative, which has been a recurring theme in this conversation. When you assert things that you're speculating very strongly, I think it is fair to sometimes say that might be misinformation when you're asserting something that's just your pure speculation. I think that we should be very clear that you're just speculating, which I don't think you always are.
Your framing attempts aside, I think it's clear to anyone watching who's remotely interested in being objective that at least 95% of what I'm saying is true. And your quibbles are things like, well, when you say suspected Russian spy, sure, he was suspected in 2009, but we don't know that he was suspected in 2016. And when you say the DNC colluded or Hillary's team colluded, well, they actually went through an intermediary, right? The thrust of and again, I remind everyone, this is literally notes that I typed up in 20 minutes before the panel, right?
Typed up a lot of notes in 20 minutes. You keep saying that, but there's a lot of stuff here.
That's right.
I'm actually a little skeptical you did this all in 20 minutes, but that's okay. I'm willing to accept that.
Just real quick, a lot of it, to be
that might be misinformation itself.
A lot of it was shit that I had saved. Like almost all these articles were shit that I have in my bookmark file. Right. Okay, so I sat down
So you aggregated in 20 minutes is what you
It was probably 30 minutes. Right. But like the specific shit that I'm typing there. Right. Other than like, for example, when we get to point 8, attacks on free speech, it's quite clear when I say spied on Fox News, James Rosen and father, then the next thing I put is U.S. District Attorney Terry Dowdy stated in July 4th, 2026. It's clear that that's just me. The article below that, I just took a portion, copy and pasted from that article below. That's the shit. But the actual typing, and that's what you're quibbling about, the words that I typed when I said Hillary and DNC colluded with suspected Russian spy. Well, actually, it was through an intermediary, and he was suspected in 2009, but I don't know that he was suspected in 2016. Anyways, I just think you're framing shit. It's just semantical bullshit. As I'd said, the thrust of everything I'm saying, Hillary's team, the Democrats are furious about colluding with Russians. They had no problem with Hillary's team colluding with Russians. That's the argument. I'm right. So far, I've been right about everything, in my opinion, but we can keep going. I'm more than happy to do it.
Well, okay, you're just once again asserting that Hillary's team colluded with the suspected Russian spy. I think that's, again, not a very strong claim. I don't think calling it collusion is very strong. I don't think calling him a suspected Russian Russian spy at the time is very strong, and that's the main thing that I initially came at this. And then what I decided to do as we walk through these was to try to add nuance and figure out more specific details, because you are asserting equivalencies among each of these things, which is why you're using them to dismiss things that Donald Trump did. So I think it's important to walk through all the details, and that's what I've been trying to do. But yeah, I
think that I'm doing a fantastic job, but hey, I'm me, so I guess I'm biased. Anyways, you want to go to the next one, or you want to jump to your favorite one? Because I think we're running out of time. It's going to be open panel soon. Whatever you want to do, man.
I've just been walking through. I mean, we can just go one. I'm enjoying going through one, but I was enjoying asking the questions that I have from my notes here. I think that's
fine. Useful. But I'm just telling you, we're clearly not going to get through them all. That's all I'm saying. But
I can live with that.
If you have a favorite one that you think I was really bad on, maybe now don't bury the lead, man. Come out with guns a-blazing. Let's hear it.
Sure. Okay. You know what? I do have some that I like more than others.
Good deal. Because the next one was mishandling classified documents. We basically just talked about that,
right?
Yeah,
we did kind of cover that one. Okay. So when we say installed Kamala and that's a threat to democracy,
yes.
I mean, I voted both times. I voted for a ticket that had Kamala's name on it.
How many times did you vote for her to be the candidate for president?
Only the second time.
Well, I guess in the primary, not the general. Zero times in the primary.
Yeah, sure. I see what you're saying.
So let me be clear. Let me steel man your position. Hopefully run through this as quickly as possible, right? Of course, ailments come up. So let's say that I vote for a Trump JD Vance ticket. He wins or vote for them in the primary, right? And then he's in a brutal car wreck and he's in a coma. Of course, we would expect that they're probably going to swap out that. Right, you would agree with that. I think we could both agree.
Yeah, or if for any reason he becomes incapacitated or doesn't. Yeah.
But that's not what happened with Joe Biden. They knew that he was cognitively declined, and they lied to the American people. So he de facto, as the incumbent, won the primary. And then only after the primary process was done did they say, oops, we got to pressure this guy out because now the whole world knows that he's a human vegetable. And so now you get Kamala Harris.
I don't buy even into the Biden was a human vegetable narrative myself. I mean, I watched that debate twice and I walked through it like I watched it with friends and talked through it both times. And I felt like Biden, regardless of his performance, I mean, I think he was engaging with the questions over and over more directly, more accurately than Trump ever did. So I don't buy the vegetable narrative at all.
I think that statement, more than anything you said, will prove to anyone that's watching how fucking insanely Trump derangement syndrome and biased that you are. It is beyond dispute at this point that this guy was fucking cognitive decline. We even have Democrats that go to bat for him, like Jake Tapper out there writing books about it. It's a joke. I'm not even going to sit here and argue with you. Well, maybe he was only slightly.
Well, I mean, I think I would say people should go back and look at the debate, look at the transcript, look at what's actually being said. Instead of just going with what you remember from it, which I understand because the first time I watched it, I felt the same. Second time, I felt a little bit different because I was watching more closely and listening more directly to what he was saying rather than cringing at just how depressing it was to watch the President of the United States look that way in real time, which again, he was also sick at the moment. I think you recall that being the case.
Why did they
deny that?
Would you acknowledge that there were significant people in the Democratic Party that wanted Biden to drop out after that?
Oh, no, of course. Yeah.
Why? If there wasn't anything wrong with them.
Hey, look, it was the optics were absolute garbage. I mean, it was terrible.
But why? Was the American people duped? You saw that the optics weren't that bad.
I don't think so. I think that the optics were that bad.
Okay, but it was just optics, and actually, if the Americans would have sat down and watched it a second time, they'd realize, oh, this guy's not cognitively declined.
I think that generally, potentially, yeah. If people spent more time with it, I think they might feel a little bit differently. But it was like hyper narrativized right out the gate. And again, it looked really bad. Like I'm not saying it didn't. So.
Okay,
I think it was probably the right move to say, hey, Biden, like maybe you shouldn't.
Last thing I'll say in this because it's fucking ridiculous. Like it's so Ryan, I like you. Don't get me wrong, but it's so fucking difficult to argue with people that refuse to see literal, undeniable reality.
I mean, you're calling him a vegetable, right? Like, do you think it's a little hyperbolic?
It's a little bit hyperbolic, of course, but he had significant cognitive decline. Do you agree with the claims that we see coming out now that as far back as 2020, the people on his staff, other people that were associating with him saw significant problems with his cognitive abilities? Or was that also made up and just optics?
I'm sure that some people had those perceptions, yeah.
Okay. I'm done talking about that. I'm not going to sit here and fucking piss with you about, well, actually, Biden wasn't cognitively declined. He clearly was. Everyone knows it. You're the only one still fucking in the trenches on that debate, but whatever. I'm not going to convince you.
Well, I mean, you said we don't even know who was running the government, right? That's in your document. We don't even know who was running the government. I mean, well, Biden, obviously the president, except for Trump might be a little bit different, but most of the time the president doesn't alone run the government. But I definitely think Biden was competent enough to do his job while he was in office. I don't think you have any evidence otherwise, except for speculation. Again,
that's not true. So there are reports from books that are coming out, etc., that Biden was basically doing nothing. In fact, one said that Hunter Biden was basically the effective chief of staff the last few months. We are now having an investigation into the auto pen scandal, that it seems that Joe Biden wasn't the one that's signing that stuff. So that would definitively prove that you're wrong.
Auto pen, wait, the auto pen doesn't mean that Biden wasn't like there being part of the signing process, right? It just means that like the signing itself was just a stamp or whatever, right?
It means that someone else used the auto pen. Right.
Well, not necessarily. But couldn't Biden use the auto pen? Could Biden not use the auto pen?
If Biden used the auto pen, then there's no there when it comes to that specific accusation. The accusation is that there's an investigation that he didn't, and only the president has pardoning power. So if someone else used it, then those pardons possibly would not be effective.
We are speculating, though, to be clear. We're speculating.
Well, it's an accusation, yes. But what I'm saying is that there is that, like, the Democrats, the point on that is unelected Democrats that are screaming about unelected officials having access to information. And I'm saying Biden was a vegetable, okay, hyperbolic language, but he had significant cognitive decline. We have no idea who is actually running the Biden administration. Again, I'm not going to fight with you. Reporting has come out even from Democrat journalists that show that that's the case. And so I'll ask you, who do you think was actually making all of these decisions? You think it was Joe Biden?
Yeah, I do think Joe Biden was doing his job. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I disagree.
Okay.
I always kind of
speculative. I want to add one other thing on this note though.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I think it's kind of funny that we're feel so strongly about this with mostly speculation. But I mean, Trump explicitly gaffed, or at least gaffed, best case scenario gaffed, when he said he doesn't remember signing the Alien Enemies Act into effect, which is a wartime act that he did in the middle of the night, allegedly did in the middle of the night, and then blamed Marco Rubio for, and then Caroline Levitt reframed this as saying that he was referring to the original signing, which, perhaps Marco Rubio is a vampire, but I don't think that's what Trump was referring to. I don't think anybody thought that's what Trump was referring to.
It is indisputable to anyone who's being reasonably objective that the cognitive issues from Joe Biden compared to Donald Trump aren't even close. And the entire point of me bringing this point up was people were upset about stories like that and stories like Elon Musk having access to private information when actually we don't even know who is running the show under Joe Biden. And you've already gave the game away, which is, yeah, that's the way it's normally done, right? Presidents don't do all this shit themselves. They have unelected people that are actually the ones that are doing the minutia details of these things. That was my point. I'm correct. You admit?
Well, I don't think you're correct to say that he was a even hyperbolically, withdrawing the hyperbole. I don't think that's a fair characterization of Biden at the time, and I don't think that there's any evidence that there was some secret reorganization of everything under the hood. I
don't know what to say. If you're the only dude in the world that thinks that Joe Biden didn't have cognitive deficiencies,
I'm not even saying he didn't.
I kind of like to ask the question, like, would you let your grandfather, make the decisions of the household, given the same external observations? That's how I look at it.
As I demonstrated in the last conversation when I was on here, I am firmly against the geriatricity. I can't say that fucking word. Geriatricity. Geriatricity, is that the right word?
We get what you're saying.
I think the people in government are too fucking old. Okay, that's what I'm saying. They're too old. All right, and so is Trump. Trump is not that much younger than Biden, and I think that he also has a lot of the signs, classic signs of cognitive decline that we point to in Biden, like using the wrong names. Like he describes Biden as Obama and Hillary a bunch of times. He does shit like that, and he just also does very, very weird meandering the things he says are just wanders into in his speeches are quite bizarre.
It's not even close. And again,
I think it is actually. I think it is under a microscope. It is actually quite close. In fact, I think I would go as far to say that like substantially, Trump's is worse.
I mean, there's no, like, it almost is so sad to hear you say something like that, because it is such an out of reality statement, right? That I can't trust anything that you say. That's how ridiculous that statement is.
I can live with
for
that.
example, Trump is probably the most accessible president in my lifetime. He's constantly going off the cuff, talking to hostile reporters over and over and over. The Democrats are the media.
Well, hang on. Can I pause you there?
Sure.
When you say successful president, and you talk about him like in terms of engaging with reporters, when I think about successful presidents, I'm thinking about
use the
what
word
Biden
successful.
did, which was a lot of.
I said accessible.
Oh, accessible. I apologize. Yeah, I thought you said successful. My bad.
Yeah, so now the media is saying they're out there. Like I saw Chuck Todd the other day say, don't blame us. We never had access to Joe Biden. We were duped by his team about how like even the Democrat media is out there saying, oh, don't blame us, man. It was because we never had access to him, because they were covering up how infirmed he was. And you're the only person I know. I assume, look, I like you, Ryan, and if you're getting the bag and Biden's team's paying you, good for you, man.
I wish they were. Hey, if you're watching, Soros.
But other than that, you might be the only fucking person that's not related to them or not on their staff that's still trying to make this argument. And in all seriousness, it's so out of reality.
I don't think that's true. I don't think that
I can show you 500 examples of Biden being incredibly infirmed, and it won't matter. We all saw it with our own eyes. We see the excuses now where everyone's admitting, yeah, he was, and yet still you're here like, I think Trump's worse. It's not worth it. It's honestly just disappointing. It's the little kid on the schoolyard, like I was saying. I'm very disappointed in you, and it makes it's such a bad.
I mean, it's great you feel that way, but I don't think that it's actually been that demonstrated that Biden was as cognitively declined as people like to make it out to be. Again, like I think substantially, if you watch that debate, go back. I encourage people to go back and watch it, listen to what's actually being said, and it's very clear that only one person in that room knows what the fuck is going on in the country.
My statement that originally from the panel a month ago was all criticism of Trump by Democrats and media should be laughed at and ignored. So in the spirit of that, I'll say, you fucking idiot. Fuck you. I'm done talking on this topic. Move on to the next one. Joe Biden was more infirm than Trump.
We've got about 5 more minutes to go. I can extend it to another 10 or 15 if you want to kind of finish that last drill down. I'll give you
whatever you want to do, Ryan.
Let's talk about the very fine people hoax, quote unquote.
Okay, we'll throw another 10 minutes on to the clock for that one.
It's did you even? I don't know if it's actually in here. I might have brought it up because it was
we can still talk about it. No problem.
White supremacist support. I assume it's under here. If it is. Well, I mean, so it came up because we were talking because of the white supremacist support.
Okay, sure. But it's not something I said. But nonetheless, we'll talk about it.
Fair. Well, just to first engage with the one you did say, you acknowledged that Biden, Harris, they disavowed the Harris team, disavowed Richard Spencer's endorsement, right?
So
Biden campaign explicitly said that his views were 10,000% unwelcome, is the quote.
Okay, so just to be clear, you're skipping the point, right? My claim was Democrats claim to care about white supremacist support, but the most prominent white nationalists in the country in both 2020 and 2024 supported Biden and then the Harris campaign. Yes, they did disavow it, but so did Trump. I could show you a YouTube clip of 47 times he disavowed white supremacy. And yet this is what happens. Let me show you the exercise, how this works. Hey, Ryan, do you disavow white supremacy?
Not only do I disavow it, I consider myself an active anti-racist.
Okay, why did you say first?
I say pretty much all the time. I have
well, it sounds like you're mealy mouth there. Do you disavow white supremacy?
Of course.
Okay, that's cool. Do you disavow white supremacy though?
I think so.
You only think so?
No, the more you're pressuring me now, I'm not sure.
Clip that, everyone. Clip that. Did you hear that? Do you start to see the absurdity of this? When someone asks you the same question over and over, and you're like, yeah, I disavow. And then they keep asking it over and over. At some point, you're going to be like, I don't even fucking know who that is. What are you talking about? That's what happened with Trump. And that's what they ran with. They kept asking him 47 times. He's like, yeah, I disavow.
So do you think people who
disavow?
Yeah. So do you think people who have white supremacist like dispositions, do you think they would prefer a Biden or Trump in office?
Richard Spencer clearly prefers
Okay,
Biden or
but
Harris.
other whites. I mean, Richard Spencer is definitely a weird character for a lot of reasons. But like, do you think in general, people who have white supremacist dispositions, so people who believe in race realism, for example, these are people who would prefer Trump or Biden in office?
I think that what you would see is they would probably prefer neither. Many of those people aren't big fans of the Jewish folks, right? And they really fucking hate Trump for that. And it has always been my
definitely
contention.
That specific subset, yeah.
It has always been my contention that the Democrat Party that hyper focuses on racial grievance policies would be more of a home for people that are white supremacists because they agree with the entire framework of the racial grievance policies. They just say it's not black people and Jewish people, it's white people. So they would feel more.
Right. So I would say that. Party. Yeah, I would say that it's pretty clear that like Trump ran very much and still actively engages with the like CRT bans and stuff like this. Which critical race theory, again, we had a long conversation about this years ago. That I wish I could. I think I tried to repost it, but I think it got flagged by Andrew or someone from his channel because it was on.
It wasn't
me.
But anyway,
just, besides, yeah, I know. I don't think it was you. Besides the point. We had a long conversation about how critical race theory is primarily asserting at its core that race is not a biological concept, but rather a legal mechanism for oppressing people of color. This is the Encyclopedia Britannica description of it. And I think that, again, it's very clear that Trump has been actively against CRT. People on Trump's side have regularly and consistently enacted CRT bans and attempted to, I mean, like, so it seems like if there's somebody who wants to believe or wants to assert and teach people that race is actually a real biological thing, they would not want people to learn the opposite is actually true. The opposite, that race is not that we know race is not that, and that race was used as a legal structure to oppress people. And if that is what they're banning from schools, I feel like that's something that white supremacists would absolutely have an affinity towards, no?
So in the words of Norm Macdonald, that sounds like some fucking commie gobbledygook to me. We can have that.
Can you elaborate on that?
Yes, right. Like it turns out that critical race theory in practice isn't just saying, hey, race is just a social construct. In practice, what it is demonizing white people and creating activists in order to demonize white people and to go after them. There's a litany of explanations. Like, for example, if you want me to bring up Chris Rufo, he has like 300 examples on his
Chris
website.
Rufo is actually the one who popularized the whole war on critical race theory. He went on Fox News and said CRT has become the default ideology of the federal bureaucracy, as if that's a bad thing for the federal bureaucracy, quote unquote, to believe that race is not a biological concept and that race was used as a legal mechanism.
It's because that's not the way that it's put in practice. In fact, even the founders of critical race theory, I remember looking at this, I forget their names, but back in the day said that their goal was to create activists in order to do this, to push back against sort of what they saw as like white patriarchy. They used queer theory, and I forget the name of the author that they used to create sort of basically Marxist.
You say those things like they're bad.
They are bad, right? And what I'm saying is that the way that this theory? Do you acknowledge that the founders of critical race theory sought to create activists through there?
Probably, yeah. I mean, I imagine anti-racism generally is an activist movement.
Do you think it's the role of our public schools going back as early as preschool and kindergarten to create activists against racism?
I mean, if there's racism in potentially. Yeah, I think we want patriots who are going to fight against discrimination in our government. Absolutely, yeah.
I think a bunch of people like you got into the academic field, and that's why we see test scores on things like math and reading declining, because people like you are more interested in indoctrinating children into racial grievance politics than teaching the shit that they should be teaching, which is all the more reason that we should take the Department of Education and throw it in the fucking garbage. Nonetheless, I'll say none of this, the conversation on critical race theory has.
The Department of Education, just to be clear, that's what was used to ensure that desegregation happened, right?
I don't give a shit what it was originally used for. Like, since the creation of the Department of Education, the scholastic achievements of children have precipitously declined when you compare us to other developed countries.
And you can attribute that directly to the Department of Education?
I think that we can. It's a debate that we can have for another day, or at least it's strongly suggested that
So you're
there
speculating
is a
that the
correlation.
Department of Education is a reason.
Nonetheless, I'll say this as we are approaching the final minutes here, that none of this has fuck all to do with my claim that Democrats that seek to gnash their teeth about white supremacists supporting Donald Trump didn't have shit all to say when Barack Obama was taking photos with known black supremacists and black nationalists, nor did they have shit all to say when Richard Spencer and other white supremacies were publicly endorsing Kamala Harris and Joe Biden. They have shit all to say about it.
Biden's team explicitly said they didn't want the support from Richard Spencer. And I think plenty of people also, I mean, I myself included, definitely at the time said that, we don't want Richard Spencer supporting the candidate that we like. It doesn't even make sense that someone who actually really wants white supremacy instilled would support this. If anything, it kind of feels like Richard Spencer was just he's kind of a troll in a lot of ways, and he was using this.
Debated him. He believes this, right? He firmly believes that we need a hierarchy, and we actually need the bureaucratic state, and he thinks that Trump would be too much of an agent of chaos. I debated the fucking dude on it. Yeah.
Okay, so he thinks that Trump would be too much of an agent of chaos for him to implement his racial hierarchy.
No, he doesn't believe Trump's trying to implement a racial hierarchy. To my knowledge, it didn't come.
No, for Richard to implement his racial hierarchy. I don't think Trump. I don't think Trump thinks that deeply about racial hierarchy.
Okay. Nonetheless, I'll just sum this up by saying this: it is clear that Donald Trump condemned white supremacy. What happened was the media made a big story, as did the Democrats. Oh my God, David Duke, and they went hair on fire. This is fucking crazy. And it didn't matter how many times Trump condemned David Duke or condemned white supremacy. None of that mattered, right? All that mattered was keep asking the question over and over.
I thought you
just like the
refused
Charlottesville
about David Duke.
He said he didn't know who he was at one point.
So when he was referring to the very fine people on both sides, what was he referring to? Who? Where?
The crux of what he was saying was this. First off, it's important to know this. He gave 3 speeches after Charlottesville. In all 3 speeches, he condemned racism, right? The third speech, the one where the fine people hoax comes from, was a speech that he was giving. I know that it's going to seem weird to you. Donald Trump does this thing where he actually goes out and talks to members of the press, not like the vegetable you voted for that just hides in his fucking basement. So it's weird. I get it. So he goes out to talk to the press about his economic
plan. Well, I mean, when you're actually doing less work, I imagine it's easier.
So he goes out to talk to the press on this economic thing that he's initiated, and they are screaming about Charlottesville again and again and again. The point that Trump was trying to make, and he ends up being vindicated. The point that he was trying to make, and he ends up being vindicated. What I think he was really trying to say was, it's not that there were good people on both sides, which I'll defend, and I think there were good people on both sides, but it's more that there were bad people on both sides. Because what was happening was groups like Black Lives Matter and Antifa that showed up with weapons to engage in fight and combat with these people. Everyone was lionizing them as they were good people, but they weren't. These are the same types of people that were beating the shit out of conservative groups like Patriot Prayer and conservatives that were going on college campuses to hear conservative speakers. And Trump was fed up with the fact that anytime a bad person does something that you could say, oh, they vote Republican, that the Democrats and the media are like, oh my God, you must answer for this. But when bad people do things that vote Democrat, it's like, no, those are really good people. Or it's not the Democrats' fault. So what Trump said was there were good people and bad people on both sides. Now, it's my belief that Trump didn't really know exclusively who was on both sides. He was just making a general claim about the tearing down of statues. You aren't necessarily a racist if you're against tearing down statues. There are good people
tearing down Confederate statues that were put up specifically in the early 1920s and 30s to tell black people in the area that, hey, you're not really welcome here?
Yes. You think anyone who was against the tearing down of statues across this nation was racist?
I think it's more likely than not that they have at least racist things they need to probably re-examine. I would say, yeah. If you're more in support of keeping a Confederate statue than at least moving it to a museum or something, keeping it in a town square, I think that you definitely have some unexamined racism, if at best.
There's this guy that just won the Democratic primary for mayor in New York. You know, Zohran Mamdani, is that his name? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
You're a big fan, aren't you? I could guess.
From what I know about him, he seems like a pretty cool guy, I guess. Yeah.
Okay. He immigrated here or was naturalized, whatever. And one of the things he talks about is he had a tweet about how shameful it is we still celebrate Christopher Columbus, right? You agree with that?
Sure. It's kind of
Should
weird.
We tear down statues of Columbus?
Should we tear them down? I don't want to tear them down. I think moving to a museum, perhaps.
Okay, but let's say Democrats vote to tear them down, and I say, no, don't do that. Am I racist?
I think so just to be clear, what I said about the specific Confederate statues is that they were put up in the 1920s and 30s as a sign to say to black people, especially in sundown towns, like, hey, you're not welcome here, which I think is a very different sentiment than the kind of founding myth of Christopher Columbus.
I think that probably the average person that was protesting the removal of statues in Charlottesville, I'm not saying that you're right, but let's assume you are. I think the average person would have no fucking clue that that was when those statues were put up. What they saw was a movement across this country to remove monuments to important people in this country, whether it be people like General Lee or the Confederates. But then remember when Trump said next? Remember when Trump said next they'll be coming after the founding father statues, and guess what happened? Are you also racist if you don't want them to take down statues of Thomas Jefferson?
Were they ripping down Thomas Jefferson statues?
Yeah, they took down statues and removed them. All sorts of the founding fathers took down paintings, statues, etc. Am I racist if I don't want that? Nonetheless,
I'd be more concerned with the Confederate statues.
The point I'm trying to make
is pretty explicit context regarding Confederacy.
I disagree. Why don't you come with me to my favorite place to go on vacation is Gettysburg here in Pennsylvania. Not that far away from me. Love it. It's a great place. They have all sorts of Confederate statues and Confederate flags. They're not racist. They're celebrating. You think they are?
I might not think so.
So wait, I just want to be clear. My wife just sent me this yesterday. You might find this interesting, Sarah. Ryan's a fucking joke, so he won't find. But it was about to become a tour guide in Gettysburg. It's fucking brutal. Like, you have to take all these tests. This woman was on TikTok talking about it. She was actually a professor that focused on the Civil War. She failed the test twice to become a tour guide in the Civil War. You think that lady's racist?
They're very, I will say they're very, they scrutinize. And if you try to give a tour and you haven't done all of these credentials for it, like you can get in big trouble for it. Even the
I'm not accusing tour guides of being racist.
But they'll have the one that I was on this bus with. He had a shirt, like a pins on it that had Confederate flags and General Lee's name and a bunch of other generals. Oh, that sounds pretty racist to me, Ryan.
It's a little sussy, yeah. General Lee, like scanning General Lee really hard is a little sussy, yeah.
I thought after the Biden not cognitively declined, you made an ass of yourself in the maximum area, but here we go. Nonetheless, this is sort of getting off in the weeds. The point is, if there's anything to criticize Trump about, it's that he was frustrated by repeatedly being asked to condemn white supremacy, which he'd already done in 2 previous speeches. And
Poor guy, yeah, it must have been really hard to do that.
I asked you 3 times, and by the 3rd time, you said you weren't sure if you condemned it. Must have been pretty easy for you to just condemn it, but instead you said, I don't know, right? Isn't that what you said?
Well, you asked me 3 times in quick succession, not 3 times like in separate scenarios,
was it too
right?
Hard? It was too hard to condemn it that 3rd time. Is that what you're saying? It was too difficult.
Well, I think what it reveals is that, like, in the moment when you're asking me the same question 3 times, it's like, wait, did I not already answer this question? Like,
what was happening with Trump was he goes out, he's like, this is fucking horrible attack. The entire media is blaming him, saying it's your supporters. He's like, yeah, we condemn white supremacy, blah, blah, blah. And they're like, oh, he didn't say it strong enough. So he gives a second speech where he does it again. Then he's like, okay, we got important matters to state. And again, I'm like, you're vegetable Biden. He actually goes out and talks to the press. He's like, yeah, we're here to talk about economics. And again, they're like, why do you condemn white supremacy? These are your supporters. Oh my gosh, it's your fault. It's your fault. And out of frustration, I don't think he's really detailed on specifically who was there. He's just like, look, in general, the people that want these statues teared down, there are good and bad people on that side, and there's good and bad people on the other side. Now, if you want to say yes, but literally were there good people? Yes. In fact, I believe the New York Times interviewed a couple people, and this woman seemed perfectly reasonable. It was like, we're just against historical statues being taken down. We showed up and we were sort of shocked to see that there were people with swastikas and shit, but nonetheless, we stayed there, and there were groups that were also in that side, like the ACLU, right? Do you think the ACLU is bad people? They were there. Are they also racist bigots?
Were they on the side? The ACLU was on the side of the white supremacists?
Yes, they were defending the rights of those people to protest, and they were on the side of the picket line with them.
They weren't the ones who like organized it, though.
No. So what? To be honest, at that point, I remember this discussion. It was when the term alt-right was being bandied about. I didn't know fuck all. In fact, if you look at the guy who put on the Unite the Right rally, it's very sus that he looks like he's probably a Democrat that was like putting that on just to smear Republicans. He was like a lifelong Democrat, but not to get too conspiratorial. Not to get too conspiratorial. The point still stands. There were people that were good people there, and there were bad people, obviously, and there were good and bad people on the other side. Trump was frustrated, and that was used like literally 3 or 4 sentences after he said there were good and bad people on both sides. He says, and clearly I'm not talking about the Nazis, the right supremacists, etc., etc. They're bad people. We condemn them, right? And that was used. Joe Biden said that was the moment he decided to run for office again, because Trump said that Nazis were good people. And that's a lie. He never said it. He expressively said the opposite.
I think that I still think it's a fair interpretation of what happened there to believe that.
Not only that, but remember the first assassination attempt of Trump and Butler? You remember that, Dan?
Is that the wait, was that when the year?
Yes.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
Okay. So like a few days after that, Joe Biden does his first public. He's still, in theory, he was the president still at the time. All right. No cognitive decline, as you well know, right, Ryan? Anyways, he gets interviewed by Lester.
Didn't say no. Never said no cognitive. Just to be clear, you don't have to put words in my mouth. I never said it was done. I the extent that people talk about it, calling him vegetable stuff. I think this is all very extremely hyperbolic. I think that it's very clear that he knew where he was, that he knew he was running the country, that he was still capable of doing his job as president. And I think that he did that job fairly well. But that's
Okay, so Lester Holt, a few days afterwards, Joe Biden's first interview after the assassination attempt, what do you think about this? And Joe Biden says, oh, it's terrible. There's too much political violence. And then immediately goes, like Charlottesville and those disgusting people. And when I heard Trump say that there are good people, that's when I knew I had to run. Imagine that. So this lie that could incite violence against Trump, a few days after an assassination attempt against Trump, the leader of the Democrat Party, at least in theory and on paper, comes out and is like, yeah, there's too much violence in this country, like Trump and the violence he inspires. It's a fucking joke. And
I think Trump incites violence regularly. I mean, he's someone who does not shy away from violence. He, like, even in his initial campaign, he was saying, I'll knock the shit out of him. I'll pay for your legal fees. He's making jokes about Second Amendment people handling Hillary.
Do Democrats incite violence?
Not to the degree Trump does. I don't know of any examples that are comparable. So
probably tonight, if you want to check real quick, Sarah, I bet we can find a live feed of another riot in Portland.
And what Democrat is encouraging it?
Well, what they're doing is attacking an ICE facility. Would you like me to find Democrats that are saying that ICE are monsters and they're terrible and they're breaking the law?
Well, are ICE breaking the law?
I don't think so.
Okay, what if they are?
Nonetheless,
is it fair to characterize them as breaking the law if they are actually breaking the law?
Is
it inciting violence? Is it inciting violence against them to accuse them of violently grabbing people without showing warrants and not identifying themselves? Is it inciting violence to describe the actions that they're taking currently terrorizing communities? Is that inciting violence?
It's bad form, but I'll respond to this with a question. If you're telling the truth, can you incite violence with it?
Potentially.
Okay, so for example, if I say, let's presume you're married, Ryan, and I say, hey, Ryan, listen to this shit. Andrew Wilson's banging your wife, Even if that's true, I might say, good, I want Ryan to go fight Andrew Wilson. Would that be inciting violence?
Just telling me that someone's boning my wife.
But if my intent, it doesn't. How do we determine what's inciting? Is it the intent that I had to have the intent? Is it that I had to say something that was false? Right now, there is currently violence that's occurring against ICE agents and facilities every day, and the Democrats are still out there saying, "Oh, yeah, ICE is terrible." Just like when Trump said, "Go march peacefully."
I guess what I'm asking is, do you think the Democrats should downplay what they believe is happening if they think that if they think that people are more likely to engage? Like, do you think if Trump actually thought that the election had been stolen, I think that if a lot of people who were at January 6th, they really believed that the election was stolen. I think they felt like what they were doing was justified. So, I mean, I'll give you that.
I think that Democrats should be held to the same standards that they wanted Trump held to. When Trump said, go march peacefully, fight for your country, they said that was incitement to violence, and they tried to kick him off the ballot in Colorado. Democrats should now be held to that same standard. That's what I think. Why not? Why not hold them to the standard they sought to hold their opponents to?
Would we?
Okay, so they're going to get pardoned?
Sure, let's throw them in prison for 4 years, kick them off the ballot, and then if their guy wins next time,
Charge
we
them
can
with
release them for
seditious
president.
conspiracy because they organized a
Sounds
violent
good.
insurrection.
Sounds
Yeah,
good to me.
but
Start the
Before we
investigations,
dive
right?
too deep,
Yeah.
before we dive too deep, we've got the extra 15 minutes run over. So let's do this, gentlemen, and we can absolutely pick right back up where you left off. Let's go ahead and close down this portion of the debate, and then we'll move into super chats and open panel. Ryan, would you like to give your closing statement?
Sure. I didn't write a closing statement, but I'll walk, like, basically as I said in my intro, like, I came here to kind of walk through each of these and find the nuances and explain where I think Rob is speculating and asserting it as fact. I think I did that quite a few times. And I think that I explained far more nuances than you would get if you just watch Rob preach about these things on their own. And that was my goal. So I think I achieved that. I appreciate everyone being here. I appreciate Rob included.
Thank you. And Rob, to you.
I will start off saying I do appreciate Ryan and Sarah coming, despite his intellectual deficiencies and bad faith bullshit. I still find him personally likable for some reason and enjoy these conversations. Sarah's always the preeminent moderator in these things, so always happy to be here. Look, the entire intent of me sending this stems back to May 29th, 2025, when he came on and gave a soliloquy about me spreading misinformation. I think it is evident that that's not the case. He was unable to substantiate that. He did exactly what I said he would do, tried to argue semantics. At one point, he literally was like, okay, there was lawfare, but I don't think it was absurd, and you used the word absurd. That's the level of fucking insanity that we're dealing with here. The only thing I'll say here is I think that you could see over and over and over again the incredible amounts of bias and hoops that he will jump through. It's always, I need more proof. Oh, just because they said they wanted an insurance policy against Trump, and just because they took these actions, still circumstantial, still you're making speculation. And yet, as soon as it comes to Trump, as soon as it comes to Trump supporters, hell, even if you didn't want statues to be taken down, Ryan is totally gung-ho to be like, racist, you're a racist. It is evident, right? The double standard that he's engaging in here. I at least tried to look through these things and hold people to account to the same standard. In fact, my audience here, if you went and watched my channel in the past week, my audience was pissed at me because I was criticizing Trump for like the bombing in Iran. I criticize Trump all the time. It is incredible how many people, and I think Ryan epitomizes it, at least in tonight, these Democrats that fucking have these absurd double standards to the point of just, it's insane. Like, it's just absolutely insane. Like, well, if you are against a statue being turned down, you're racist. But if you say, I need an insurance policy against Donald Trump, and then have illegal warrants to spy on his team, well, we don't really know. We shouldn't speculate about what those motivations are. I think that I did a tremendous job, but I'm me, so clearly I'm going to think that. I hope that the audience enjoyed it. Let's get to the open panel. I'm looking forward to that as well. So thanks.
Perfect. Thank you, gentlemen. Yeah, take your time. We're going to get through some super chats. And to the crowd, I am dropping the open panel link in the chat now, and I will pin it as well. So if you would like to join the open panel dumpster fire, please feel free to start heading backstage now while we go through super chats. Gettysburg is nice, though. I will say that.
It's my favorite.
That's where we did our like first year anniversary as because we just love Gettysburg. It was always the best place, and the history and just the downtown area is really the square and everything.
Even if, like, there's things, even if you're not just into like historical, like they have all these ghost tours. If that's your thing, right?
Oh my
there's
God,
a lot of really neat shit.
Fun.
Yeah.
They are so fun. That was we loved it. We went back several times, and it's not that far of a drive for us, so it's nice.
My wife gets tired because every time she'll be like, "Where you want to go on vacation this summer?" I'm like, "We should go to Gettysburg." She's like, "I'm tired of going to Gettysburg." I'm like, I love it. It's great.
Well, I'll go hang out with you in Gettysburg. Yeah. It's definitely it's a fun spot for sure. Rude Mud Crab, with the big 5 says, win, Sarah, Ryan, Rob, and chat. Salute to you, Krabby. We love having you here. Evan Lord says, sorry, Sarah, for making you say a lot. Gosh, you jerk. And then you come back again with it. Evan Lord following up, I have a cup of coffee, a can of cola, and a tall cup of water, so I hope I can go on more coherently during open panel dumpster fire than Friday. Yes, that was quite comical. I love Evan Lord. He's usually quiet. He is backstage here hanging out, and we love him all the fun. Jess Gerald says to both of you, if you guys could handpick the next president, who would it be and what is the main reason?
Me? Because I think that I agree with me. Nah, I would say probably at this point, JD Vance. And the reason is I think Vance is he has the sort of populist message that I support and the distrust of a lot of these establishment institutions. But I think that he is more ideologically that way, whereas Trump's just more shooting from the hip and sort of a narcissist that just wants to be liked. And so I think that JD Vance stands to be possibly a life-changing politician more than Donald Trump if he would get the presidency.
Okay, Ryan?
I don't know. I think about it more. I don't think there's anybody right now who stands out as like the ideal candidate for me. So I'm still kind of weighing.
DeSantis would be good as well. Of course, Trump 2028 sounds good, right? It'd be all right.
I think it's a real possibility. I think people will defend it too. I think the people you were criticizing for defending everything he does, like the Iran strikes, those same people, I think, will be cheering him on when he tries to run for a third term and refuses to leave office again, as he did in 2020.
There are certainly people that have a cultish following of Trump, and he could come out one day and say, hey, we're banning ARs, and they would say, yay, and then come back the next day and say, never mind, we're rolling it back, and they would say, yay. But those people pale in both number and severity to the people that cultishly hate Trump like you.
I think I have good reasons for hating Trump, but that's okay.
Fair enough. Cool V1C says with a big 5 for the wine fund. Thank you. Betwixt with a big 10. Question to Coder. Can you just admit you'll say anything in bad faith that advances your worldview, no matter how hypocritical you are? Every debate, your moral outrage is exclusively for conservatives.
I don't think I'll just say anything. I think that I've been very clear about the things that I was saying. I was like making specific fact-based claims and trying to identify where we were speculating and where we weren't. I don't even think there wasn't really that much moral outrage in this conversation, to be honest.
Let me ask you this, if you don't mind. Humor me.
Sure.
When's the last time you were on camera, like your own stream, a panel like this, where you were heavily critical of the Democrats in any sort of way that you are to Republicans or Trump? Not, hey, they should run this guy, but literally talking shit about actions that they're taking.
Just talking shit about them in general. I mean, I won't deny that I view the Republicans as an existential threat to this country. So I'm not going to pretend I give anywhere near.
Do you think because of
I view the Democrats more of a shield than I do as like a lance for my own like political agenda. I don't see them as like, I don't like ideologically align with them perfectly or anything. And we could have I could go and like walk through the Democratic platform and things I agree with and disagree with. But I view Republicans as truly dangerous for the people who live in this country and the country
itself. Do you
itself.
think the fact you believe that might bias some of your opinions on nuanced discussions like tonight?
Certainly, yeah. But I consider that bias. That's why I try to focus on the fact-based claims and not focus on the things that I feel very strongly about, which is what I just described, which is that I feel like they are an existential threat. So I focus on the facts tonight.
Fair enough. Old Sarge Finkel, oh, I forgot to say this earlier, sent in the big 50 on Cash App earlier just to say, yo. I love that. Short and sweet and to the point. And then he follows up with the big 20. He says, Paul Manafort pled guilty because he was guilty. He confessed. Let it go.
Guilty of
what? Good reason.
Guilty of what?
I think this was, you guys were going through, which part was it?
Hey, Ryan, remember the last time I talked to you about Manafort or the Russia collusion investigation? I said, can you show me anybody on Trump's team that was found guilty or charged with a crime regarding interfering or colluding with Russia in the 2016 election?
Yeah, and so we discussed earlier in this stream. We talked about how one of the things Paul Manafort was investigated for. I don't recall if this actually. I think it resulted in charges. I don't know if this was one of the convictions. I think it was not one of the convictions for a variety of reasons. But we talked about specifically his sharing internal campaign data with Constantine, right?
Was during the 2016 election,
secret campaign data. I don't think he was found guilty of a crime in regards.
Correct. And David, just to say this, right? One of the things that Paul Manafort, probably the most serious thing that he was convicted of, was failing to register as a foreign lobbyist, a FARA Act violation. The Mueller investigation showed that he acted with two groups. This was in 2013, by the way, before Trump was ever running for office. Manafort worked with Mercury LLC, that's a Republican law firm, and the Podesta Group to commit his crimes, both of which also didn't register as foreign lobbyists. Now, if that name Podesta sounds familiar to you, drum roll, please. That's because that was Hillary Clinton's campaign manager. The exact same station of Hillary Clinton's team, campaign manager, in 2013 committed the same crime, at least his agency did, the same crime that Trump's did. And did they charge? Did Mueller's team go back and charge anyone at the Podesta Group? No. They were allowed to retroactively file paperwork. So what you're missing here, David, is when the FBI decides we're going to pursue you as aggressively as possible, sometimes you may plead guilty. I don't give a fuck. If we're going to charge FARA violations, do it. What I do give a fuck about is it's clear that the Podesta Group was doing the same shit and the FBI decided not to go after them. It's clear that Hunter Biden wasn't registered as under a foreign lobbyist, and yet he was clearly lobbying for foreign interest. It's clear that Glenn Simpson from Fusion GPS wasn't registered as a foreign lobbyist, and yet he was lobbying for foreign interest. These are laws that, for whatever, you can insert your own reason, but the same people that said they needed an insurance policy to stop Donald Trump from winning, all of a sudden were applying these laws against Trump's team that they were intentionally allowing Democrats off the hook for.
And Finkel follows up to say, and he had plenty of funds to have a legal defense, but, well, he was guilty, just like Mike Flynn. And then
David,
he
on
said,
that note,
and then
go ahead.
Then he says, Paul and Mike were neighbors here in Alexandria, and Kellyanne Conway was frequenting both homes while Trump was pretending like they were barely known to him.
So here's the type of argument. Here's where David would be in 1940, right? Let's say that you had a southern town and you had a racist sheriff and police department, and they decided we're only going to pull black people over for traffic violations, right? Only black people. Right. And so one after another, they watch a white guy drive by 70 miles an hour. No problem. Then comes a black guy, 60 miles an hour. Get him. Speeding ticket. And they do this over and over again. And then someone like me comes along and goes, wow, it seems like the sheriff is corrupt and has a bias, because we could see evidence that there are all sorts of people in this other group that he has an affinity for that are committing these same crimes, but he's refusing to charge them. And David Finkel would be there and go, yeah, but didn't that black guy plead guilty to the speeding ticket? Didn't he plead guilty? So shut up, Rob, the black guy. Do you want black people speeding? Yeah, I want a equal application of the law more than I want crimes like FARA violations to be charged. That's what I want. What I don't want is anybody that accuses Russia of interfering in our election. What Russia could do is a pittance to what our FBI could do if they decide they're going to put the thumbs on the scale of the election. And they did and continue to do so.
And just to say my piece on that, I think that Rob just fired off a lot of things as he's known to do. And I think that if we sat down and we could go through every single one of those, I believe there would probably also be some extra nuances that we did not get the chance to touch on that would explain a little bit more. But maybe he's completely right. The FBI is totally corrupt and just absolutely loved Hillary Clinton and hated Trump, and that's the end of the story. But I just find that very unlikely that it's that simple,
Dave, send in $100 super chat disagreeing with me to Sarah. That'll show me.
Fair enough.
Yeah, me too.
I'm going to skip. I'll come back to the 5 and ups, but I'm going to skip for now and just because I forgot Rob and Ryan both talked very long time. So we're just going to do 10 and up right now, and then I'll get to the 5s when we open the panel. Jonathan sends a big 10. Jonathan sends a big 10 just to tell you all to shove off. Thank you, Jonathan. I'll come back to this one as soon as Rob sits down.
Also, I think I think this is the person who was in the back, Calvin. I know he didn't have a camera or whatever. I've talked to him before, so I can vouch for Calvin specifically.
Okay.
If he comes back with the same picture and everything, I would stake that he's safe to bring on. But
if you vouch for him, I'll accept that. So Calvin, that's fine. As long as you vouch for him. If there's a penis on screen, it's your fault, Ryan.
It's on me. Yeah. I will. I'll show my wiener though.
Okay, fair enough. And actually, Calvin just sent a big 20 on Cash App just to say make up default super chat. That's actually pretty funny. I'll come back to this one once Rob sits back down. David Finkel, old Sarge Finkel says, if Hillary did the same thing as Trump in 2016, here's the difference. Nobody voted for Hillary in 2020 or 2024. Many voted for Trump.
I can respond to that if we're ready for that.
Go ahead.
What is this? What's the relevance of this to anything? So I guess then Alvin Bragg would have charged Hillary if she was running for office in 2024. Is the argument that we're really making here that Alvin Bragg only pursued Trump because he was running for office? That seems to be a huge problem, David.
I think what David's pointing out would be more about the voters' perception of those people. If we're presenting equivalencies between Hillary and Trump, Hillary wasn't on the ballot in 2020 or 2024.
But what happened was, right, first, so my argument stands about the actual investigation. Those are the real bad people, the ones that are weaponizing this lawfare. But if we just limit it to Democrats, right, because I'm saying Democrats that didn't give a shit about Hillary Clinton doing this. Also, I'm not going to listen to them talk about Donald Trump. Nonetheless, they could say when I'm talking to them directly, oh, yeah, Hillary did that. That was really bad, too. Of course, Democrats that I debate try to do that. And then the next question I ask is, OK, so are you OK with the selective application of the law? I can't tell you how many times I've debated someone. For example, the easiest case is Hillary's team deleting subpoenaed evidence. So again, remember what my statement is. I don't really give a shit about Hillary. She will be gone. What I give a shit is about weaponized FBI, which has far more of an ability to influence our politics and election more than anything Russia could do or Hillary could do or Trump could do. They will be there in perpetuity, even after Trump and Hillary are gone. And I say they are selective in their application and bias in how they do this. And then what will happen, Democrats always do this. It's not happening. You're a crazy tinfoil hat conspiracy theorist. And then 4 years later, once it's proven that happened, they go, oh, yeah, that was bad, but it's a long time ago. Sure, I guess they should have charged people anyways, moving on. So then the obvious question is, okay, they didn't. Now what? Do you acknowledge that the FBI engaged in a double standard? Because that's my entire argument. And no doubt David would do the same thing that every Democrat NPCI debate says, like, right? That's the point. Like, if you say, yes, I have a problem with what Trump did, but I also have a problem with what Hillary, it's just I didn't vocalize it because Hillary wasn't running, fine, whatever. That's clearly not what's going on. No one gave a shit at the time when Hillary had an FEC violation for a campaign finance thing. You didn't either. Neither did Ryan. You just made it a big deal because you thought it could hurt Trump in the election.
So one thing I want to point out is that, again, I believe, and you can confirm or deny this, but I believe you are speculating when you suggest that Comey's claim that no reasonable prosecutor would bring that case against Hillary for the negligence or whatever. When he says that, he's lying because he likes Hillary.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And that's speculation on your part, though, to be clear.
If I could find a reasonable prosecutor that would be, then what would James Comey's just wrong then? So he's either wrong or he's lying or wrong.
Yeah, lying or wrong. Yeah.
And Calvin sends the 10 to say, Rob, Manafort providing polling data is relevant because it helped the Russian target their disinformation. Trump's campaign aided a Russia attack our election. That's worse than Oppo. That's what I'm thinking too. Oppo research.
Even if I conceded the first sentence, it's laughable that would be worse. So again, now we're forced to believe that targeted. If we assume, by the way, I'm not conceding it because there is no evidence that it helped Russia target. It was speculation that they said that, but there's no, show me the ad. Oh, you guys are 2 points up in Iowa, so we'll make a Pokemon Go. You know those Gyarados and the Pikachus in Iowa at the supermarket? We'll put an ad right there, right specifically in fucking Des Moines. Yeah, there's no evidence that happened. Secondly, even if it did, right? No, $100,000 to $200,000 of campaign ads, right? in a election that there were $1 billion is far less than opposition research that was disinformation that was used by Hillary's team that was released before the election to try to influence people under the false narrative that Trump was colluding with Russians, and then used by the FBI in part to get illegal FISA warrants to spy on Trump. It is clear by any objective metric that that's worse than Pokemon Go ads.
If it was only Pokemon Go ads that we were pointing to, I would agree that that would be worse than just Pokemon Go ads. But I don't think that's all that we're referring to.
What were the other ads? The targeted ads. Go ahead. What were they?
Pokemon all I'm saying is I don't believe that it's just Pokemon Go. But
no, it's also Facebook.
Okay.
And Jest
Yeah,
Gerald, we love Jest over here. Send tomatoes in chat for Jest. He sends a big 10 to say, Rob RC, thanks for being here. What is the biggest disagreement you guys have, and what is the biggest agreement you have?
Let me go first.
Yeah, sure.
Biggest disagreement is probably about like the nature of Trump derangement syndrome, and like-minded or like similar alleged, delusions that people have regarding political figures. I think that was like the crux of this whole conversation. The biggest agreement, I think that Rob genuinely, I believe that Rob probably cares about this country and wants it to be successful. And I think that we both agree very strongly on that. We might have different ideas of what that looks like, and we might have different ideas of where the corruption lies and what that corruption is. Like how that corruption is manifesting, but I think fundamentally we do want the best for the American people, and I think that is a strong point of agreement.
Probably true. I don't know. Yeah, that's probably true. I'd say the biggest agreement would be that we had fun tonight and enjoy this, right? Biggest disagreement would be sort of what he said, but just that I think that his bias and TDS so clouds his judgment that you could see sort of the hoops that he's willing to jump through. I don't know how to make it clearer than, no, I don't think Joe Biden was that cognitively declined, or anyone who was against statues being torn down was racist, versus, well, just because they said that they wanted an insurance policy against Trump and then had illegal FISA warrants to spy on him, it's speculation as to what their motivation could have been.
I want to two things there. Number one, I stand by my the people overstate the like demonstrable cognitive decline of Biden. I think people overstate that and overstate that he was not running the country, blah blah blah. I think also that racism is a very common feature of American life, and I think that we underestimate how much it influences people. And I think that's part of why things like critical race theory are valuable. So to say that people who are like standing Confederate statues, that whether they know it or not, were put up as to intimidate Black people, I think that they are probably at best unaware of latent racism. But that's
is Louis Farrakhan racist?
Conversation. He has like anti-Semitism, right? Like he's done some weird. Are you asking if he's racist against white people? Because yes. I don't describe racism that way. But
you can't be racist against white people.
You can be prejudiced against them. He probably is.
No, that's not the question. I noticed you changed the word. I asked if you could be racist against white people.
Yeah, and I said, yeah. I mean, I don't think that we have them like in America. There's not like a mechanism for Black people to oppress white people.
Okay, a Black guy stabs a white guy because he hates white people. Was that a mechanism to oppress him?
It was a prejudice attack.
But it wasn't racist.
I wouldn't say not in the way that I'm generally referring to racism. We can use it in like a colloquial way, and I understand that like when people do. But when I refer to racism, I think when most people like who actually like
this
study
is
these
why
things,
we're against critical race theory. You see the outcome of critical race theory. You see.
Yeah, the outcome is that people like actually are pointing to like real systemic injustices in terms of like healthcare system, the school to prison pipeline, and a lot of like much bigger problems than an isolated incident of a prejudice attack, which we're obviously condemning, obviously calling prejudice, which is still a bad thing. It's still bad to be prejudiced, but that's the end result. Oh no, we didn't use the same word as for both kinds of things. Like, oh no, it's the end of the world. Critical race theory is destroying our nation.
You continue to surprise me with a shittier and shittier take. Every time I think you say something that couldn't get fucking dumber, you come out swinging with another banger.
Oh, boy. Vordum with the Big Ten says, question for Radical Coomer. Do you genuinely believe that Joe Biden was competent even after Rob Hurst said he was competent to stand trial, but somehow competent to run the country?
I do think that Joe Biden was competent enough to run the country when he was in office, yes.
So when Robert Hur does his investigation of the mishandling classified documents by Biden, and part of his decision not to charge him was that he was infirmed and that a jury would think that he was just a confused old man. You think Robert Hur was lying? He was wrong?
I don't know what his exact phrasing was, but if it's like what you just said, that he thinks a jury might assume he was infirmed, that's kind of a different thing, but
whatever.
Fair enough. Team Fatty sending out 5 Raging Tomato memberships. Congratulations to all of you lucky lottery winners, and thank you to Fatty. And last one for now. During the lead up to the 2020 election, the right was pointing out Biden's cognitive decline. I will admit I see some in Trump, but after all these years of denial from the left, I couldn't care less.
That was the original. That was the original point of the panel I was on last month with Sarah. That's the crux of what I'm saying, right? The entire reason that you see Jake Tapper and them coming out and writing these books now are 2 things. One, because they want to they see that trust in the media is hitting all-time lows. So they're trying to be like, it wasn't us. We were lied to by Biden's team. And then immediately they pivot to, but Trump, he looks cognitively declined too. And my argument is we should tell those people to kick rocks. I don't care what your opinion is. If there was someone, if Ryan was sounding the alarm on Biden's cognitive decline for 3 years, right? And then he wanted to come on and talk to me about, well, what about signs I see in Trump? I would happily talk to him. But Ryan's not that guy. Ryan's the guy pretending that there wasn't significant cognitive decline of Joe Biden. So I don't give a fuck when he tries to say that Trump's worse. I laugh at Ryan and tell him also to kick rocks because it's clear that he's arguing in bad faith.
So I don't think that I've said it's clear that there was no cognitive. I said this over and over that I think there was some cognitive decline. What I've been saying over and over again is that I think that Biden was competent enough to run the country, and I do think that I've said for years also that a lot of the signs that people were pointing to in Biden, even during his presidency, were things that were also manifesting in Trump. So I could make the same argument by saying that the people who don't care about that, why should I take them seriously when they point at Biden? But I wouldn't make that argument because I think both are bad, right?
And I'm pretty sure that's Kissy Cat because it's Pharma Cat. And maybe I don't know who it is because they're playing handles now in the chat. And I'm sorry to anybody who I don't recognize if your username does
she's
not
a mod,
match.
so it's probably the cat you're talking about.
I'm pretty sure it's Kissy Cat. I'm pretty sure, but I don't know. But I'm pretty sure. But shout out for the 10 gifted Raging Tomato memberships. We love you all, and congratulations to your lucky lottery winners. Tomatoes in the chat for Kissy Cat. All right, gentlemen, are we ready for the panel?
Always.
I'm good.
All right, let's have some fun. All right, Rob's cam cut out on him, so I'm sure he'll be right back. He probably had system overload from all of that awesome music that I love. I'm pretty sure everybody likes the Gauntlet intro music because every time I play it, everybody backstage is like backstage jamming out like this.
That's incredible.
It's a bop, for sure.
Oh, there he is. You're back. Yay. He's back.
Sorry. Yeah.
That's okay.
I'm not able to jam out. All I can go is like this.
All right, can I ask you a question right off the chat? Are you tired walking that dog? Has he taken enough of a dump for you to let him back in yet?
I enjoyed it.
Kissy Cat confirmed. It is, in fact, Kissy Cat. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And here's what we'll do, gentlemen. Of course, you all know my rules on being on panel. I hate when you guys rudely interrupt each other all the time and be jackasses. So let's try to keep it fairly calm. I love the entertainment factor, but you all know where my line is drawn. Outside of that, I will, during the time, what I'll start doing is I'll start interrupting to read some more of the $5 super chats because they do deserve to be read. But outside of that, I will let you guys have the conversation. All right. Evan, you want to kick us off, darling, since you're always the one that's the quietest?
All right. Rob, something that I'd say or I feel like you have a point in all of your nitpicking about the legalese and everything else. But at the same time, there reaches a certain point where it feels like you've beaten the horse to death enough where you should realize that with every answer you have to provide another receipt, and then that receipt is blocked, so you have to go back another layer. It just seems like you're arguing for just nothing, pretty much.
Well, I would disagree. I think it's the opposite, right? I think what happens is I provide a receipt. That receipt is true, or you could semantically argue some little quibble about it. And so then I go a step further. Most people that aren't as good as me or aren't arguing factual things would just say, whatever, it's true, and leave it go. For example, Evan, do you find my tactic when it comes to Joe Biden's cognitive decline to be more persuasive, where I'm like, go fuck yourself, it's obvious? Is that what I should say? Or do you think that I should go to, when I say, here's my evidence, and someone says, but wait a minute, what about this? And I say, okay, well, here's my answer to that as well. You think I should just stop after level 1?
No, I don't. But I think maybe a few times you could reference a few of the moments where he's had a serious gaps, or he fell down the stairs of the Air Force One, or a few other cases like that. And if Ryan doesn't go in operate in good faith, then I think that providing more is a waste of effort.
Let me ask you this. Your initial point that you think I'm beating a dead horse too much, give me an example of something in this debate where you could point to where you thought that was the case.
Yeah, and this argument about to go nonsensical real quick.
All right. Listen, I'm not here to kind of tell you how to debate or anything. I just know when it came to when you were arguing in the case of the Ukrainian person who may or may not have been a Russian spy, there was a lot of back and forth with that. And it got to such a point where it kind of, I know for me, I can listen to something for a long time, but I kind of gradually lose interest until it's all right, I kind of get the point that there's two different perspectives, and it seems like this is not going anywhere.
But again, Ryan was controlling the direction of the debate, so much so that I probably said 4 or 5 times on that topic, you want to move on to another topic. He makes a claim, I respond. He makes a claim, I respond. He makes a claim, I respond. It's not incumbent on me to say, I refuse to answer this time because I'm afraid that Evan is getting bored with this. I was trying, for the sake of the audience, to move it on to another. Not only that, but me and Ryan had this same discussion 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago on topic 1, the Russia collusion, for over 2 hours. And so I was trying to help Ryan and to help the audience because I was like, people are probably getting tired of this, but I'm not going to fucking let up on a point that I think I'm right about if he keeps bringing it up.
Yeah, I saw what the guy on the bottom saw, that you were hanging on to that shit and you were willing to go in on it as much as possible. You were even asking, well, explain this and that. You was culpable as he was. Don't act like you were, your hands were fucking clean.
Oh, well, thank you so much for your input, Joe Cool.
You're welcome. Anytime.
I think that what I was doing is what anybody would do in a debate. When someone makes a claim, if you're able to refute it, you refute it. I was also trying to move the conversation to a different topic.
That's the part that I disagreed on.
I was happy to keep refuting the arguments that he was making. Let me ask you, Joe Cool, was Konstantin Kilimnik a Russian spy? Was he?
I read that Mueller shit a long time ago. And no, I couldn't keep up with the tedious bullshit that you guys were trying to do that you want me to go into now. No, but I think there was enough proof in my shit that they were corroborating with the Russians. The shit with what is his name, Giuliani, and them 2 guys that he was with, that Russian connection. But
let me answer
I
real
think
quick.
that
Well,
Mueller
it sounds like
also.
you're beating a dead horse.
I wasn't done yet. I wasn't done yet. I almost was
Let me answer
done.
you here real quick, if you don't mind, Joe.
Interrupt. I do mind. Clearly, that's why I'm still talking.
Hold on, Rob.
But you go ahead.
Let Joe at least finish.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, and I do believe Mueller said the same shit that was collusion. That was it.
Joe, I'm not surprised that you said, and I quote, I couldn't keep up. It seems evident from your fucking shitty commentary here that you don't have the intelligence to be able to keep up
brilliant,
with something like
brilliant.
Don't interrupt me. Don't
brilliant.
Interrupt me, Joe.
Look at your brilliant response. Are you a woman? What the fuck was that?
You made a statement. Let him respond.
He's not. He's being a dick.
I'm a woman? Excuse me, I'm a woman because I'm pointing out that you're a fucking
See, you're
idiot and an
showing,
imbecile.
You're showing the shit I was talking
interrupting
about.
again. There he goes, interrupting again. Fantastic, Joe Cool. Now, I'm not surprised that you're unable to keep up with this conversation, obviously, and instead you just default to, yeah, but I'm pretty sure there was collusion, Rudy Giuliani and 2 Russian. Let's talk about that. Rudy Giuliani and those 2 Russian guys. Tell me what you know about that.
I'm not interested in that bullshit. I didn't listen to you do it. Why the fuck would I want to entertain you on that shit?
So then
I just told you went into that shit too much and that with him, and now you want me to date you too?
No, I don't want you to date me. What I want is when you make a claim, what you want is you want to make a claim and then you're unable to back up the claim.
Yes, that's what it is.
That's right. Then back it up.
Yes, my claim was that I wanted to talk about fucking Giuliani and them 2 fucking Russian pricks or whatever the fuck they was that got caught and went to jail at the airport. Yes, I said I thought that was.
Mueller report?
I thought that was shady and
that was in the Mueller
collusion.
report? That was from the 2016 election?
I don't know if I think Giuliani was.
A woman pointing out that I'm a fucking idiot that doesn't know anything. What are you, a woman, Rob?
I have.
Joe, you're crushing this, man.
Wait. I should have remembered the details of the fucking Giuliani from fucking 14 years ago, in case I might debate your goof ass.
Let me interrupt, gentlemen, for just a moment for logistics. I'm officially shutting down the tomato side here in 2 minutes. Follow the link over to the Gauntlet. I also have set the rate. Okay.
Yeah, this is a great example. You have no arguments. All you have this bad faith nonsense. If you had an argument, present it, right? This is nonsense. What you're doing is the same shit you was doing for him. Prove this, and then you debate it. Prove that. What about this? He's right. You will hang on to shit for endless amounts of time and miss every opportunity to make a good argument. Is it because you have a lack of them? What are your arguments?
I know that you must be correct because you say fucking shit a lot, like average people with high IQ. So clearly your argument's correct. You said that I should be making an argument. That's generally how arguments work. You make a claim, then someone says, I question that claim, and then you back it up.
Oh, thank you, because I was curious about how that works.
Yeah, I know you were curious.
Ask me more about Giuliani. Ask me more about Giuliani.
Fucking curious and shit, man. How arguments go, fucking shit, fuck shit, curious and arguments and fucking shit. You should make arguments instead of rebutting the claims and fucking proving and shit the shit you say, motherfucker.